Chapter 131. Breaking into the Forbidden Area. Anyone else not convinced? Ling Han stopped moving and smiled at the others. Everyone else shook their heads. This guy was really too fierce. Anyone who was not in Gushing Spring Tier was completely unqualified to come to blows with Ling Han. The few Gushing Spring Tier martial artists gave a humph. They had no fear of Ling Han, yet they dreaded facing Lu Yutong. Currently, Lu Yutong had her sword in hand and was standing guard by Ling Han's side, so no one dared to make any reckless moves. Most importantly, they did not have the time to bother with Ling Han right now. That stock of spiritual medicine had escaped into the mysterious zone, so the most important thing now was how they were going to tempt it out of there. More and more people poured out to surround this area on all sides. This was probably the central zone of the whole underground space. It was circular in shape, and occupied quite a large area. Most importantly, that dark area seemed to be swallowing all of the surrounding light as if it was a solid object, capable of blocking their sight. A person standing at one end would not be able to see the other end at all. Thankfully, there were enough people who had entered here, and could somewhat ensure that this area was completely surrounded. At least, if that stock of godly medicine ventured out, they would know instantly. What now? After they had formed a circle around the dark area, everyone asked awkwardly. Make sure it's trapped. I don't believe it's never coming back out. Someone said. Are you stupid? That is a plant. It can completely dig its roots inside for a few years to a few hundred years, but what about us? We would have to leave after 3 days, at most. Another person rebuked. Oh right. The person who had spoken earlier said with a bit of embarrassment. Everyone was frowning in thought. That was definitely a stock of spiritual medicine and may have even reached the legendary godly level, yet they could only stand here and watch. This feeling was really about to drive them crazy. Some of them left to inform the old monsters waiting outside the opening, hoping that they could have some idea about what to do, while the others continued to stand guard here. Ling Han slowly neared that invisible wall. He stretched out a hand to feel it. A very familiar feeling. A sliver of a smile turned up the corners of Ling Han's lips. Years ago, he had ventured to a lot of ancient historical sites and had witnessed a lot of similar situations. That was also why he had shouted out the warning earlier on. This was not a wall, but an aura field that was at a level above Heaven Tier. If he was still in Heaven Tier, then based on the studies he had done on this kind of aura field, he could break through it by force and allow himself to pass through, but now, he was completely unqualified to attempt that kind of thing. Could it be that he would have to use that? Ling Han took out the damaged saber. This was his disciple's treasured saber, and could also possibly be the only remnant of his disciple that he would be able to find. If he used all the remaining might of the spiritual tool in a single explosive burst, he should be able to forcibly use the power on par with Heaven Tier. But the problem was, such an explosive burst would also mean the complete end of this treasured saber. Ling Han hesitated. Moreover, there was another problem. This treasured saber could only explode with such power once, so after he entered, how was he going to get back out? But after a short moment, he finally made his decision. He had to go in. Because there was not only the godly medicine inside. The secret behind that great battle years ago should also be hidden there, and he wanted to find out the reason for that battle. Moreover, if there was really the corpse of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier inside that had formed this aura field, then who knows, he may have a way to disperse this aura field. You two, cover for me, Ling Han said to Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. As this area was very big, everyone was standing about 10 meters apart from each other to completely surround this area. Thus, Ling Han was standing in between the two girls. It would not be very easy for the people standing at the other side of the two girls to notice him there if they weren't paying attention. The two girls did not know what he intended to do, but they both nodded, because they knew that this guy had the ability to achieve the impossible. Ling Han began to revive the treasured saber. Jiang Yufeng's martial intent originated from him, and though he was extremely weak at the moment, their martial arts were of the same vein. With the stimulation of his divine sense, the martial intent engraved in the treasured saber began to awaken. Wang. The seals on the treasured saber began to light up one by one, shining brightly. However, this was the last light that would be coming from it. Soon, it would become completely ordinary, like any other normal weapon. Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of hesitation. He used the treasured saber to pierce through the aura field to open up a path for himself. Even so, he was still in a very emotionally tense state. The treasured saber in his hand was shaking as if it was a fish out of water, and even his body was shaking along with it from the force of its quivering, so much that he was forced to walk in a zigzag pattern. His figure instantly disappeared into that dark area, and could no longer be seen. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan were both dumbstruck with shock. They exchanged a look with each other, and in the other's eyes, they could both see deep astonishment, as well as strong admiration. Was there anything that this youth knew, this man could not do? They quickly withdrew their gazes and became alert, focusing on the task of covering for Ling Han to ensure that no one would notice that he had disappeared. Otherwise, even if Ling Han did manage to get any treasure, based on his current ability, he would not be able to keep it. Sweat covered Ling Han's whole body. There was danger everywhere in this aura field. Years ago, when he was still in Heaven Tier, a single wrong step would mean severe injury for him, and with his current cultivation level of only the 6th layer of Element Gathering Tier now, this was practically trying to pull chestnuts out of a roaring fire. Any slightest bit of mistake could cost his life, and there were definitely no second chances. Yet this made him even more excited. He was completely focused, and his eyes were extremely bright. There was usually not much difference between a genius and a maniac. In his last life, he had put his focus on alchemy. Once he began to concoct alchemical pills, it would be as if he had transformed into a maniac, and this life, he had put his focus on martial arts, and so similarly also had one part of him that was a maniac, though he had not had a chance to display this part of him before. This kind of situation where danger was surrounding him on all sides caused his whole body to shiver, yet also made him even more excited. To be wavering between the boundaries of life and death allowed him to deeply feel the significance of life, and his divine sense was surging like oceanic waters. He even had a kind of feeling that perhaps this kind of dangerous place was the only way to train one's divine sense. The light from the treasured saber began to flicker, and Ling Han experienced a shock. The damage to this treasured saber was far worse than he had imagined. It had only withstood such a short while, and it looked like it was about to go out. Although he enjoyed taking risks, but taking risks and going straight to his death were two different things. He hurriedly sped up. As he had to calculate the changes within the aura field, his mind was extremely focused, and his mental energy was being expended at a very fast rate. The sweat covering his whole body was dripping down like water, and in a few short moments, had dampened all his clothes and even left behind traces of water underneath his steps. Yet it was as if he did not feel anything. His eyes were bright, and he continued to advance. Wang! The treasured saber gave a final flicker and the light from all the seals vanished all at once, the seals shattering. This meant that the martial intent inside the treasured saber had been completely wiped out. Who? Ling Han took a leap and charged out with a loud breath. He had finally managed to make his way out of the area that had been sealed in by the aura field. Light had again appeared in front of him. This was an area that was only about 100 feet in size. In the center, there was a corpse that was sitting in a cross-legged position on the ground, and that stalk of godly medicine was currently working hard on rooting itself into the ground. However, it seemed like the ground here was especially hard. Such a long time had passed, yet the stalk of godly medicine had only managed to insert half of its roots into the ground. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he quietly approached the stalk of godly medicine. He did not know if there was a back and face to the godly medicine, but it was obvious that the stalk of godly medicine had not yet noticed that he was there. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han suddenly leaped out, and stretched out a hand to grab that stalk of godly medicine. Chapter 132. 3 Roots. The godly medicine was doing its best to dig its roots into the ground, and had not thought that anyone would have been able to suddenly break into the area sealed off by the aura field. Thus, it was completely caught unprepared by Ling Han, quickly pulling its roots out of the ground, ready to race off again. But this time, it was one step too late. Though its movements were indeed very quick, and it had already removed its roots from the ground, Ling Han's hand also managed to grab onto its roots. Z! The godly medicine looked like it had experienced a huge fright. Even the flower that was blooming had instantly withdrawn all its petals, and even the stem was twisted and bent. But in the next instant, it suddenly started to struggle fiercely, and it actually flew out of his grasp. Xiao! It scrambled into the area sealed off by the aura field, and in mere moments, had completely disappeared within the darkness. Ling Han was astounded. When he uncurled his fist and took a look, there were 3 torn-off roots left in his grip. There was a milky white liquid dripping from the torn-off ends of the roots, and all of a sudden, an indescribable refreshing fragrance filled the air, making his whole body relax. It was as if he was about to become as light as a feather and ascend to heaven. This was the godly medicine. How could Ling Han dare to waste it? He quickly stuck out his tongue to suck and lick clean that milky white liquid. Any single drop wasted would be an unforgivable sin. It's invigorating. So damn invigorating. Just a whiff of this godly medicine was enough to make him feel light as a feather and ready to ascend to heaven. Swallowing the several drops of liquid made this feeling even stronger, as if all the pores of his body were completely open and spiritual chi was automatically gushing in, nurturing his entire body. It was a feeling too amazing for mere words. His divine sense in particular had been greatly augmented, and his blood, flesh, nerves, and bones had all obtained a similar upgrade. His cultivation level, on the other hand, had increased the least. The value of the godly medicine is not in upgrading one's cultivation level. Ling Han thought. He expanded his divine sense and closely observed the changes taking place within his body. Vitality. This was the conclusion that he had come to. With the nurturing effects of the godly medicine, his body and its vitality had obtained a great upgrade. Any martial artist would know that a human being had a mere lifespan of about 100 years. Only if one managed to break through to flower blossom tier would they be able to break the restrictions of being mortal and gain another 200 years of life. Otherwise, even if they ate some kind of 1,000-year ginseng, it would only aid them in slowing down their aging process at most, and thus allow one to live for another few years. Why could a flower blossom tier martial artist obtain another 200 years of life? That was because the vitality within his body had been strengthened. After flower blossom tier, every breakthrough to a new tier would mean a new transformation, continuing to gain more and more life and vitality, and continuously increasing one's lifespan. Most importantly, there was a lapse after heaven tier. Since a heaven tier martial artist could reach shattering void tier, then the longest lifespan of a martial artist was limited to 1,000 years. A godly medicine could achieve the same kind of effect. He had just swallowed a few drops of the godly fluid, and Ling Han's life and vitality had obtained a great upgrade. As someone who had once been a powerful warrior of heaven tier, he could make a rough estimate. He had roughly gained an extra 20 years of life. 20 years. Just a few drops. If he had managed to swallow the whole stock of godly medicine, how many extra years of life would he have been able to get? 1,000 years. That was the lowest estimate. That was equivalent to a powerful warrior of heaven tier getting another lifetime to live, and for mortals, that would be another 10 lifetimes. What was the most valuable thing in this world? It was not cultivation technique, martial arts technique, or wealth. It was life. That was another extra 1,000 years of life. This would be enough to drive powerful martial artists of heaven tier crazy. Ling Han stored the 3 roots of the godly medicine into the spatial ring. Increasing lifespan was one of the effects of the godly medicine, and naturally, was the greatest effect, but there were other uses for it to reform the physical body, and thoroughly clear away the impurities accumulated in one's body. He had a heaven-grade spirit base, but this did not mean that his body was also heaven-grade. On the other hand, he had a very normal body. However, after he had began cultivating the invincible heaven scroll, his physical body had ascended to the level of body of dead tree, and he was able to match those races with special constitution. In other words, his body was still very far from the level of perfection. At least, there were still 3 different levels ahead of him: body of rock cliff, body of iron sheet, and body of diamond. Moreover, this was only the first level of the invincible heaven scroll. Godly medicine can help one to improve one's physical body. Who knows, I may be able to use it to achieve body of rock cliff. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he managed to learn body of rock cliff, not only would his defenses be even stronger than before, he would also be able to condense another 2 drops of indestructible true fluid. He would then have altogether 3 drops, so he would have even more trump cards in hand. It's too bad. If I had an intact stock of godly medicine, I may be able to soar right up to body of iron sheet, or possibly even body of diamond. He could not help feeling very regretful, but he soon laughed in spite of himself. Then he said to himself, a man can't be too greedy. In my last life, I did not see even a level 9 treasure, and now, at the mere level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, I not only saw a level 10 godly medicine, I have even obtained 3 of its roots. If I am still unsatisfied with this, then I really deserve to be struck by lightning. He cast his eyes at that corpse sitting in the center. He had a feeling that this was the source of everything. This corpse had obviously experienced a great battle. At least more than 100 of his bones had been shattered. It was very hard to imagine how he could have managed to continue fighting when he had had so many of his bones broken. Ling Han slowly approached and took a closer look at it, and could not help becoming astonished. There were actually multiple golden characters on these bones. However, perhaps too much time had passed, or perhaps this person was too heavily injured, for these characters have all practically dimmed. However, this did not hinder Ling Han from feeling the might of these golden characters. Rather than saying these were written characters, it would be more appropriate to say they were part of a designa design that illustrated the powers of nature, and used these characters as a method of displaying them. Wait! Ling Han startled. The invincible heaven scroll is also like this, because I have no way to use mere words to recite it out. He came to a sudden understanding. No wonder he had needed 10,000 years just to comprehend the first level of cultivation technique. That was because it had far surpassed the level of mere words, and had reached a whole new level. However, although I have only taken one look, I can confirm that these golden characters on the bones are no match for the invincible heaven scroll. The complexity level of the two were completely different. But, I can definitely conclude that this is the corpse of a powerful warrior of Shattering Void tier. If I am able to pry apart even a single shred of his martial intent, it would definitely be very beneficial to me when I break through to Shattering Void tier in the future. Ling Han said to himself. He widened his eyes, intending to memorize these golden characters. Hong! A red flame suddenly gushed out of the skeleton. It was dazzlingly bright, and there was a wave of heat that surged from it, causing Ling Han to take a few steps back. A red-colored flame floated above the skeleton, and formed into various shapes, as if it had its own life. A strange fire! Ling Han gasped out in surprise. Strange fire was a very strange substance born from nature. It could also be described as a type of energy, and it was indescribably valuable to martial artists and alchemists alike, for once a martial artist refined the strange fire, he could refine his own physical body, raise his cultivation level, or even develop some fire-type martial arts technique, and if an alchemist fused with a strange fire, he would get a great advantage when concocting alchemical pills. Why? Because the most important thing in concocting alchemical pills was fire control. However, a martial artist had limited power, so the heat of the flames one could produce was extremely limited. But the strange fire could increase this limit by a considerable number of times and allow an alchemist to gain much more room to exercise his abilities. For example, for Ling Han, based on his ability, he could concoct alchemical pills as high as heaven grade. However, due to the limitations of his cultivation level, he could not do so because he was unable to produce flames with such a high level of heat to heat his alchemy furnace. But, if he were to fuse with a strange fire, then while concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills would still be impossible, there was a great possibility that he would be able to concoct earth-grade alchemical pills. Even if it was not possible for him now, by the time he broke through to Gushing Spring tier, he should be about able to. Instantly, his eyes lit up. Chapter 133. Fusion. Ling Han's only feeling now was that his luck in this life was unbelievably, illogically great. In his last life, although he was an ultimate warrior of heaven tier, whether it was the godly medicine or the strange fire, he had not even managed to see either of them. But in this life, he was only in the 6th layer of element gathering tier and he has already seen both these extremely rare items, and had even managed to obtain 3 roots of the godly medicine. If he could also manage to make this strange fire his own, Ling Han's heartbeat sped up in spite of himself. The strange fire could allow him to concoct alchemical pills of a higher grade than he could at his current cultivation level. The extremely high heat of the strange fire could also become one of the hidden cards up his sleeve. He was a bit curious now. How did this strange fire come to be? One has to know that there are many types of strange fires, but there was a need to meet certain requirements for each type to form. The most common type of strange fire was of course those born in the depths of a volcano, but there were also some special types of strange fires that were born within cold places, or even within freezing ice. These were known as flames of ice, and they had the ability to freeze living things to death. But what about this place? Ling Han could not think of any conditions here that would induce the birth of a strange fire, aside from this corpse in front of him. This corpse had been an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier when he was alive. Could it be that an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier was even able to form strange fires? Ling Han pondered in his thoughts, though his eyes were still fixed upon that strange fire wavering in front of him, thinking of how he might be able to make the strange fire his own. If he still had the cultivation level of heaven tier, then there would naturally be no problem. He would only need to dominate it by force. But with his current cultivation level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, if he dared to attempt to take it by force, the most likely scenario would be being burnt to ashes. Little fire, come. You'll stay with me from now on. Ling Han acted like he was calling over a little puppy. The strange fire continued to morph into various shapes, and ignored him completely. That was natural. How could the strange fire be able to understand human language? Ling Han gritted his teeth. If he used divine sense, he would be able to skip over using mere words to communicate with the strange fire, but the problem was, did he dare to use his divine sense to come into contact with that strange fire? The might of the strange fire was more than enough to completely burn his divine sense to ashes. At least, the first level of cultivation technique of the Invincible Heaven Scroll did not include a method to heal one's divine sense. But, to just give up the strange fire like this was not something he could do. He thought furiously, and suddenly came up with an idea. Could he ask the Black Tower for help? He had a feeling that the level of the Black Tower was above even this ultimate warrior of shattering void tier, so it should be able to dominate over this strange fire. The problem was that although the Black Tower was currently staying in his body, it definitely had the character of a boss, and usually more or less ignored him. Would it actually help him? Let's give it a try. He used his divine sense to move the Black Tower, yet Master Black was completely unmoved, and ignored him. Ling Han was not the slightest bit discouraged, and continued to use his divine sense to harass the Black Tower. He had already witnessed it once before. The Black Tower was not an inanimate object. Finally, the Black Tower gave a light quiver, and emitted a shock wave. He did not feel anything from this shock wave, but there appeared even more shattered seals on the bones of the corpse, completely unable to withstand the shock wave from the Black Tower. The strange fire looked like it was a little girl that had received a huge fright. It suddenly shrank into itself, and was trembling. Ling Han's heart moved, and beckoned the strange fire over. A surprising scene happened. The strange fire actually leaped into his hand. What was even more surprising was the fact that Ling Han did not feel any bit of scalding heat on his hand. The strange fire indeed had its own spirit. Ling Han bravely communicated with the strange fire, using his divine sense to transmit his thoughts over, and said, "Little guy, you stay with me from now on, and I will find even more strange fires, and let you all fuse together to finally become the most powerful flame of this world." Using divine sense to transmit ideas was a communication method that surpassed the limitations of language and race. Any existence with consciousness would be able to understand. Yeah. The strange fire transmitted a blurry thought, like it was an infant just learning how to speak, so it was very indistinct. Ling Han finally understood. Though this strange fire had developed its own consciousness, its intelligence was too low, as if it was a newborn baby. Kids should be very easily duped, right? Ling Han emitted a kind aura, allowing the strange fire enough time to think things through. In truth, he was not lying. In the future, if he encountered a strange fire again, he would definitely make a move and continue to fuse the strange fires he managed to obtain together, increasing the might of the strange fire. In this world, all living creatures have an instinctive desire to become stronger and closer to perfection. The strange fire was no exception. It was unable to cultivate, but it was able to fuse with other strange fires to increase its own intelligence and might. Ling Han did not rush things, and continued to communicate with the strange fire. He had the confidence that the strange fire would eventually agree, because the Black Tower had just displayed its might, allowing the strange fire to feel that he was a man with power. A talented person would choose a good master to serve, as the saying goes. The intelligence of the strange fire was still at a simple level, and could be described as extremely innocent. Thus, if there was a need for it to choose a master, then the first thing it would consider would be the strength of its master. It was all right even if Ling Han's cultivation level wasn't very high, as long as the Black Tower was awesome enough.
Yeah.
The strange fire transmitted blurry thoughts and all of a sudden, disappeared into Ling Han's palm, and like a drop of water sinking into sand, it was immediately absorbed and entered Ling Han's body. Ling Han had never obtained a strange fire before, but in his last life, he had managed to acquire the correct method on how to refine and absorb it, and so was not unfamiliar with the next step. Now that the strange fire was in his body, he had two choices. The first choice was to refine the strange fire and erase its intelligence, transforming it into pure energy to nurture and strengthen himself. The second was to fuse with the strange fire and preserve its intelligence, something like making his body the new residence of the strange fire. For a martial artist, they would definitely choose the first option without any bit of hesitation. But how could Ling Han break his word, even if it was one given to a strange fire? Moreover, he still needed to concoct alchemical pills, so naturally, the best option was to preserve the strange fire intact. He fused with the strange fire, and the little guy was coiled in Ling Han's left hand, fusing with Ling Han's soul. The black tower lightly trembled, possessing the might to dominate over everything, allowing the process to be exceptionally smooth. After a mere half an hour, the fusion process was complete. Ling Han's eyes snapped open. He stretched open his left hand, and a raging red flame burnt upon his palm. Yet this was not something powered by his origin power, but rather came from the strange fire.
Yeah.
The strange fire also emitted delighted thoughts, seeming to be very pleased with Ling Han's body. Go! Ling Han waved his left hand, and the strange fire instantly left his hand. With a mental command from him, it began to continuously dance and move around on the ground. He beckoned his hand again, and the strange fire flew back to him and once again disappeared into his left hand. Ha. Now my battle prowess has gotten another upgrade. With the raging flames of the strange fire, I'd be able to kill even spiritual ocean tier martial artists. What more mere gushing spring tier? However, how to get near them is a problem. No one would be foolish enough to allow the strange fire to get near them. However, if I allow the strange fire to coil around my fists, or around the blade of my sword, then when others underestimate me due to their own carelessness, there is a real possibility I'd be able to kill them right on the spot. Then let's just see who would be so unfortunate. Ling Han looked once more at the corpse. Due to the several shock waves emanating from the Black Tower, more and more broken seals were appearing on the bones, and the golden characters were no longer identifiable, making him feel a strong regret. That was the martial intent of a powerful warrior of Shattering Void tier. Forget it. I'm being too greedy. Ling Han said, my gains this time are already indescribably colossal, and what use would the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier be to me now? I am able to soar smoothly all the way to Heaven tier in the first place. Now the problem is, how do I get out of here? Chapter 134. Return. When Ling Han looked at the corpse, a speculation appeared in his heart. Years ago, Jiang Yufeng and so many other elite warriors of Heaven tier were ganging up on this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, and the final result should be that neither side won and everyone died. However, the ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier was too powerful. Even after his death, he managed to create a forbidden zone that no one could enter. After 10,000 years, even the martial intent of a Shattering Void tier martial artist would weaken, and in a sudden earthquake that revealed the underground river, various spiritual tools floated out on the waters of this underground river, and finally managed to tempt him to this place. Ling Han did not know who this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier had been when he was alive, but he fully trusted his disciple. Since Jiang Yufeng took part in this battle royale, then this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier must have committed heinous crimes. If he wanted to leave this place, it was simple. Because the source of all the restrictions in this place was the martial intent of this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, then as long as he managed to erase this person's martial intent, then everything in this place would naturally return to how it used to be. For others, erasing the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier was absolutely impossible. However, for Ling Han, this would only be a slight effort on his part. After all, the source of the martial intent was this skeletal corpse, and now that this skeleton was about to collapse, he would be able to turn it completely into dust as long as he exerted a bit of effort. Under normal conditions, Ling Han would naturally not do something like destroying someone else's remains, but this guy was very possibly a man that was wicked beyond redemption. Ling Han did not hesitate for a moment and delivered a single kick. Pa! The skeleton that was already fractured in many places in the first place instantly collapsed, and all the golden characters carved on it transformed into an invisible energy that surged out in all directions. Changes were immediately obvious. At first, Ling Han was not able to see anything outside the aura field, but now that the martial intent of the shattering void tier warrior was completely gone, the aura field had also vanished without a trace. Thus, his sight was no longer hampered in any way. Ling Han! Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan cried out in surprise at the same time. Ling Han's eyes cast a look around, yet found that only the two of them were there. There was no sign of any of the others. He was stunned at first, but then swiftly understood the godly medicine had ran out earlier on, and so must have attracted a lot of people to chase after it. Thus, there was naturally no one else here. I've made you wait. He nodded at the two girls. The two girls gave a reserved smile in response. In truth, the two of them had been very worried about him before, but they did not have such thick skin to so openly display their anxiety. Let's go. The three of them went back the way they came, yet they had only walked for a short while before feeling a very powerful aura press down on them. Li Zhongyi and the other old monsters had appeared. The remains of the ultimate warrior of shattering void tier had been destroyed, so the light of God had also disappeared. There was nothing left to deny these old monsters entry. These old monsters swiftly passed them by. No matter how highly they thought of Ling Han, they would never think that the disappearance of the light of God had anything to do with this young man. They all had their attention focused on that stock of godly medicine, and so of course would not have the time to waste on chit-chat with Ling Han. Xiao xiao xiao, their figures soared, and were soon very far away. Godly medicine. They had no hope of getting their hands on it. Or so Ling Han thought. That godly medicine was level 10, and though it was not very powerful by itself, the speed at which it could escape was incredible. Even if he still had the cultivation level of his last life, he would have to expend a lot of effort to capture it. The reason why he had been able to succeed in catching hold of it just now had been because there was still the aura field of the ultimate warrior of shattering void tier pressing down on it, slowing it down. Additionally, that stock of godly medicine had also been careless, and had not expected there would be anyone who might be able to enter the aura field. There was no longer any value left in this place, so Ling Han chose to leave without any hesitation. However, there was still a few questions that were left unanswered in his heart. Why had there suddenly appeared an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier 10,000 years ago? Why had so many heaven tier elites suddenly appeared? And what unforgivable crime had this shattering void tier martial artist committed that caused him to be ganged up on by so many heaven tier martial artists, which eventually led to their mutual demise? No matter how hard he thought, he could find no answer to any of these questions. Perhaps, this would remain an unanswered mystery forever. Ling Han regained his composure. This time, he had managed to gain 3 Treasurisa spatial ring, 3 roots of the godly medicine, and a strange fire. The spatial ring was all right, but the latter 2 treasures were items that even he in last life would covet furiously. What a colossal reward. On their way out, they naturally saw a lot of the others searching all around for the godly medicine. Ling Han did not stop at any moment, of course. He decided to return once they had made their way out of the underground river. Xiao. The 3 of them had just stepped onto the riverbank, and they immediately saw that stock of godly medicine run past them. It passed them by swiftly and instantly disappeared into the distance. Xiu, xiu, xiu. Li Zhongyi and the other old monsters soon appeared, hot on its heels. All of them looked extremely furious. Obviously, they had been played by that stock of godly medicine. Ling Han could not help but smile. Now that the light of God in this place had disappeared, that stock of godly medicine had lost this natural protection, so it would of course not be staying in this place anymore. Most probably, it would never return here again. However, his guess was that this stock of godly medicine wouldn't leave Rain Country either. When he had once again reached Heaven Tier, he could come back here to look around. Who knows? He might be able to obtain this stock of godly medicine. After the light of God had disappeared, the level 9 spiritual tools all left the underground space at a quicker rate. There was no way to obtain those that still retained their spirit, and there was not much value in getting those without spirit. Ling Han did not want to continue staying here, so after asking the 2 girls for their opinion, the three of them returned to the imperial city together. When Wu Songlin saw that Ling Han had returned so quickly, he could not help feeling very surprised. But at the same time, he also breathed out a sigh in relief because for an old man like him, taking care of the two little girls was indeed a headache-inducing task. Hunyo was too wild, so he could not hand her over to be taken care of by servants. The only option left was for him to take care of her, and babysitting her for a mere few days was enough torment to cause him to lose a few pounds of weight. Ling Ling. When Hunyo spotted Ling Han, she instantly pounced on him and hung herself from Ling Han's shoulders, her little face bearing an overjoyed grin. Ling Han could not help but laugh. It was really rare to hear this little girl not say, "meat." Looks like she had indeed missed him. However, he had barely completed this thought before hearing Hunyo exclaim, "Meat, meat, meat." Fine, the deep-set character of a glutton was difficult to change. "Let's go eat meat." He picked Hunyo up, while his other hand held onto Ling Zixian, and left with the two little girls in tow. Lu Yutong naturally followed him, but Li Xichan could not be so willful. She could only reluctantly stay behind to assist Wu Songlin because Wu Songlin had just recently achieved a new level of comprehension and intended to concoct a type of black-grade high-level alchemical pill. If things went smoothly, he would attempt to concoct an earth-grade alchemical pill. The ingredients necessary for the concoction of an earth-grade alchemical pill were too expensive. Every time the furnace exploded, it meant a colossal waste of resources. Even a high-ranking person like Wu Songlin dared not begin the concoction process so easily. He needed to have a certain level of confidence that the furnace would not explode. This was also one of the reasons why there was no earth-grade alchemist in Rain Country. Due to there not being enough chances to try concocting earth-grade alchemical pills, how could it be possible that anyone would succeed in becoming an earth-grade alchemist? Of course, this was also related to the environment in Rain Country, where earth-grade ingredients were unbelievably expensive. However, in bigger places, although earth-grade ingredients were still very valuable, their value was not to the extent in Rain Country. Heaven-grade ingredients were the really priceless ingredients there. Ling Han carried Hunyo while Lu Yutong held onto Ling Zixian's hand. The four of them went and had a great feast at a restaurant. It was all on the tab of the third imperial prince anyways, so money was no issue. After they had their fill, Lu Yutong and Ling Zixian left. They had their own accommodations. Moreover, Ling Zixian also needed to cultivate, so how could she keep clinging on to Ling Han? After Ling Han had returned to his own courtyard, he took out a root of the godly medicine and prepared to refine it. Chapter 135. Thoroughly clearing away the filth in the body. He was a little loath to part with it. Ling Han did not immediately refine it. This kind of a godly medicine had the life-saving abilities of growing flesh on bones and reviving a dead man. For him to simply refine it like this, he really felt a bit hesitant to make a move. However, this was only a moment's hesitation. He had already learnt body of dead tree, and thus had condensed a single drop of indestructible true fluid. This had the incredible effect of saving his life. Although its effects were a bit weaker when compared with the godly medicine, it had the advantage of being able to be condensed again after being used. Moreover, as long as he managed to learn the body of rock cliff of the invincible heaven scroll, he would be able to condense another 2 drops of the indestructible true fluid. There would be no more godly medicine once it was eaten, while the indestructible true fluid could be continuously condensed. It was obvious which one was more profitable. Additionally, the godly medicine could give his physical body a complete upgrade, strengthening his core and banking up his origin power. These were all solid benefits for him. Ling Han did not lack comprehension of cultivation. What he lacked was time, and the godly medicine could compensate for his lack of time very well. In this life, luck is on my side. Ling Han tossed the root of the godly medicine into his mouth. One bite, and he could feel a strong fragrance spread out in his mouth, and there was a light, airy feeling in his whole body, as if he would be flying at any moment. Invigorating. He continued to circulate the invincible heaven scroll while directing the medicinal effects to spread into every part of his body. Changes were immediately apparent. He could clearly feel his cells strengthening, his bones becoming sturdier, and the blood flowing in his veins becoming more energetic, as if there was an ultimate warrior thoroughly clearing away all the filth accumulated in his body. Very soon, a black layer of filth appeared on his body. This black layer was made up of the impurities accumulated in his body which, with the effects of the godly medicine, were now forced out of his body. Don't underestimate this. When a martial art is cultivated, that was a process of upgrading one's physical body. When he reached Flower Blossom Tier, there would be a change in the nature of his body, casting off his mortal body and evolving into a higher level of existence. Just like a rock that, with continuous grinding and refining, slowly becomes a beautiful piece of jade. Forcing out the impurities in one's body was equivalent to refining oneself, and speeding up the process of transforming into jade. This change was very slight, but the effects were extremely obvious. Ling Han could immediately feel the spiritual qi entering his body was obviously circulating faster than before. That was natural. Since the impurities in his veins have decreased, spiritual qi could flow throughout his body at a faster pace. And that was not the only benefit. Now that the circulation of spiritual qi had become faster, when he began circulating origin power in future, it would also be a faster process than before. What it meant was clear: the faster origin power was being circulated, the greater the destructive power behind his blows. This was a solid upgrade. His life and vitality were continuously becoming stronger, and there was also a certain level of upgrade to his divine sense, making him experience the feeling of having a clear head. When he pondered, his thoughts were forming at a faster pace and were clearer than before. Exhilarating. 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 After about half a day, he had completely refined the root of the godly medicine. What a pity that there is practically no increase to my cultivation level. Ling Han sighed. But it was all right. Previously, he had taken advantage of the opportunity and embezzled the resources provided by the imperial family of Rain Country, as well as the 8 great clans, to concoct a large amount of alchemical pills that could help him increase his cultivation level, so he was not missing out. He took out the second root of the godly medicine, swallowed it, and continued the refining process. Hong long long. This time, he could sense a thunderous noise within his body, as every bone was groaning and crashing one into another. This time, the effects of the medicine had gone even deeper, and it was stimulating a great change within the bones of his body. This was not so exhilarating. On the other hand, the remolding of his bones was an agonizing process, as if his whole body was being shattered to be rebuilt once more. The pain caused him to suck on his teeth, and sweat poured down like rain from his body. Ah! He released a series of low groans. Bing! 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 Very quickly, there was a banging on the door. It was Hu Niu, who had heard his moans of pain and had thus come to check up on him. I'm fine, Ling Han said through gritted teeth. Pang! But it was obviously completely pointless to say this to Hu Niu. The violent nature of the little girl had activated, as she crashed in. After rolling around on the ground once, she looked at Ling Han simple-mindedly. When she saw that he was still able to sit in a cross-legged position, though he had sweated a lot, she immediately bared her teeth in a grin. What a heartless little girl. Ling Han did not have the time to bother with her at the moment. The invincible heaven scroll continued to circulate, and his body was still absorbing the effects of the medicine to remold the bones in his body. The agony surged continuously like oceanic waters, crashing into him so hard that he felt like he could faint at any moment. But if he actually lost consciousness, he would not be able to circulate the invincible heaven scroll anymore, so the effects of the medicine could only circulate throughout his body instinctively and without any conscious guidance from him. In that case, the effects would naturally be much weaker. Most importantly, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to force his body all the way up to Body of Rock Cliff. That meant that he needed to circulate the invincible heaven scroll and absorb the effects of the medicine based on the secret arts in the heaven scroll. I shall endure it. Endure it. Endure it. Endure it. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Veins were popping up on his head and his neck. There soon appeared a puddle of water on the spot he was seated at, and it seemed as if he had just been fished out of the water, as both his eyes looked a bit empty. He was also eating godly medicine this time, yet why was there such disparity between the first and second time? Ling Han let his thoughts run wild to distract him from the agony he was experiencing. He thought about his father, who was still in Grey Cloud Town. He also thought about Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. He even thought about his last life. He did not know how much time had passed, but that strong feeling of agony finally began to weaken, eventually completely disappearing. Ling Han breathed out a long sigh of relief. Just now, he had even had the thought of giving up, but thankfully, he had persevered. He looked down at his body. Impurities had also been forced out this time, but they were not black in color, but rather white. These were the impurities from within his bones, thoroughly clearing out the filth in body. It did live up to its name. The first portion of the godly medicine improved his body and flesh, and the second portion refined his bones. Then what about the third portion? Ling Han breathed out and took out the third portion of the godly medicine. Smells nice. Smells nice. Hunyao immediately pounced over, her eyes fixed upon the godly medicine, saliva nearly dripping out of her mouth. Little girl, you haven't begun cultivating yet, so it would be too wasteful for you to eat this. Moreover, the medicinal effects are too strong, and you'll get constipated, Ling Han said with a laugh. Eat. Hunyao grabbed Ling Han's arm and tugged repeatedly, acting like a spoiled child. No. Ling Han shook his head firmly. There was no use acting pitiful. Hunyao stretched out her little head, and gave a strong struggle, aiming a bite at the godly medicine. She had struggled too strongly, and Ling Han actually lost his grip on her in a moment of carelessness. Her mouth had bitten onto the godly medicine. Oh no! If it was bitten by this glutton, then there wouldn't even be scraps left behind. Indeed, he immediately felt a little tongue licking at his hand. That was Hunyao, who had still not had enough and was gnawing at his hand like it was a chicken's leg. This prodigal child. Ling Han sighed. That was godly medicine, and he had in total only obtained 3 portions, yet 1 portion was actually wasted on this little girl. She 11. Hunyao turned back around and gave him a large grin. When Ling Han saw this, he couldn't manage to get angry even if he wanted to. Who asked him to cry out so horribly just now and alert this little girl? When it came down to it, the little girl had barged in because she had been worried about him after all. Forget it. Hopefully, you can withstand such powerful medicinal effects. Ling Han sighed and carried the little girl out. He was in desperate need of a bath. There was filth covering his whole body so much that he felt horrible just from smelling it. After taking a bath, Ling Han took a look inside his body, and revealed a satisfied smile when he saw the results. His body had obtained a great upgrade this time round. Though he had yet to reach the level of body of rock cliff, his bones had become as strong as steel, and his skin had become tougher too. It should not be too far to go before he reached body of rock cliff. Most importantly, there was a huge upgrade to his life and vitality. He only felt full of energy, and so no matter what he did, he felt full of enthusiasm. The next morning, Ling Han vaguely felt that something was a bit off. When he thought things over, he finally realized something. Hunyao had not awakened yet. Usually by this time, the little girl would be awake, clinging to him and yelling out her, "Meat, meat, meat." Chapter 136, Egg. A glutton actually forgot to eat. That was equivalent to the possibility of the sun rising from the west. Ling Han's first thought was that there was definitely something off with the little girl. Something must have happened. She had just eaten a portion of the godly medicine yesterday, and based on her current cultivation level of mere body refining tier, such a nutritious kind of medicine must have been too powerful for her. Ling Han went to the little girl's room. At first, she slept beside Ling Han, but according to Lu Yutong, even if Hunyao was still very small, she was still a girl, so she had cleaned up a room for her. When he entered the room and his eyes swept over it, he instantly got a shock. Because there was absolutely no sign of the little girl. Instead of a little girl, there was an egg on the bed. That's right. It was an egg, and it was an extremely big one too. It was wide enough to fit in a man's arms, and about as tall as half the average height of a man. The egg was as white as snow, but there were multiple golden patterns covering the entire egg. Ling Han was dumbstruck with shock. Even if the little girl went through a complete transformation and became a young beautiful fairy, he would be able to accept the reality after experiencing a slight shock. But a living human being actually transformed into an egg. What could this mean? He did not have any doubt that Hunyao was currently inside this huge egg, because there was no disturbance to the restriction he had set up. Obviously, no one had entered or left the area. Hunyao's origins were extremely strange in the first place. After all, she could increase her cultivation level by consuming large amounts of food, which was a very shocking thing. Thus, though the effects of the godly medicine were unbelievably powerful, it was not impossible for the little girl to refine it, and this was also why Ling Han had not been overly worried the day before. But a hen became a duck, and a little girl became an egg. This was extremely bizarre. Ling Han approached the egg. He began observing it, but could not find any clues from his observation. He stretched out his hand and placed it on the egg. He discovered something very surprising. The egg was emanating high heat, as if it was about to burn up at any moment. That was indeed very possible. He picked up the egg and placed it on the floor to avoid the whole courtyard turning into ashes if it did start burning up. Where did this little girl actually come from? Ling Han was getting more and more curious. In his last life, he had stood at the peak of martial arts and had ventured to a considerable number of ancient historical sites, as well as had a considerable understanding of the various races with special constitutions. Yet, he had never heard of any race that could increase their cultivation level simply through consuming food, and could even transform into an egg. He did not dare to break open the egg to check up on Hunyo either. Although he had never seen such a thing, but he could refer to birds and knew that it was necessary for chicks to break open their eggs on their own. If he cracked the egg open, then that would definitely be an impatient move, and only cause harm to Hunyo. He had just been reborn not too long ago, yet he had actually encountered so many bizarre events. Thankfully, he had a healthy heart, or he would have already had a heart attack from a series of so many shocks. Forget it. From the looks of it, it's quite peaceful, so the little girl should be fine. Then, I'll just let her continue incubating. When he said the word incubating, he could not help but show a weird expression on his face. Every morning after waking up, he would go seek Mo Gao out for a discussion on the art of the sword. This had become his daily habit. Because he had been away the last few days, he could not join Mo Gao for a discussion, but now that he was back, he naturally went to Mo Gao's courtyard. The two of them discussed the art of the sword while simultaneously verifying each other's standpoints, so they both improved drastically. In less than 3 days, I should be able to break through. Tomorrow, I will be entering seclusion, Mo Gao announced suddenly. Ling Han was at first stunned, then he raised his clasped hands in Mo Gao's direction and said, "My congratulations to you, Teacher Mo. This sword maniac was a genius in the first place. However, he had fixed his target too high, placing his aim directly on the sword heart and thus causing his cultivation to stagnate for these 10+ years. In other words, any other person needed only get 10 marks to advance 1 level. But Mo Gao wanted to get 1,000 marks and directly advance 100 levels. As a result, he was naturally stuck where he had begun. However, after his many discussions with Ling Han, the grand door of sword arts that had only opened a single sliver to Mo Gao was now completely wide open, and he had all of a sudden attained a drastic improvement. As the saying goes, good preparation is the key to success. Thus, he had attained the comprehension he needed to break through in this short period of time. Ling Han did not feel anything was strange about this. When compared with the difficulty of forming sword heart, breaking through to gushing spring tear was a piece of cake. This sword maniac had finally found his way, and at least before spiritual infant tier, he would not encounter any bottlenecks in his cultivation. He could completely depend on his comprehension of the concept of sword heart, and had boundless prospects ahead of him. Ling Han was happy for him as well. He had secretly decided that once this teacher of his had reached spiritual pedestal tier, he would teach him a cultivation technique. Since all the cultivation techniques in Rain Country were at most only level 5, there was no way to peek into the mysteries of Flower Blossom tier. Otherwise, there would have at least popped up 1 or 2 geniuses in the 8 great clans that managed to break through to Flower Blossom tier after so many years, right? He did not know what fateful encounter the Qi clan had come across that allowed them to possess a powerful warrior of Flower Blossom tier, which secured their place as ruler of this country. Could it be the power of the nation? Ling Han had never been an emperor before, so he was not very familiar with the concept, but when he recalled that in the 9 nations of the desolate north, only the imperial clan had a powerful warrior of Flower Blossom tier to oversee things, then it should be related to being the ruler of a nation. Before this, Ling Han only knew that stimulating the power of the nation could increase one's battle prowess, like Qi Yongyi. He was only the son of a king, and so could only stimulate the power of a single city, but his Son of Heaven Fist technique was still very powerful. If the ruler of a nation used the Son of Heaven Fist technique to stimulate the power of an entire nation, then that would definitely be far more powerful. But could the power of the nation also increase one's cultivation level, allowing one to break through to Flower Blossom tier, and complete the step of casting off one's mortal body? Ling Han shook his head. Whatever, he didn't need to worry about cultivation techniques anyways. After leaving Mo Gao's place, it was already about noon. Ling Han did not want to cook when it was only him, so he went out of the academy and visited a restaurant to have a meal. He had not been in the Imperial City for a very long time, thus he would pick a different restaurant every time he ate out to try out which restaurant had the best meals. However, it seemed that he was a natural magnet for trouble. He had just finished placing his order and was waiting to be served when he saw a company of 4 come upstairs. It was mealtime currently, and this restaurant was obviously very popular, because there was no empty seat in sight. Thus, the company of 4 stood at the head of the stairs, casting their eyes all over the place, seemingly looking for an empty table. A waiter approached them and seemed to explain something to them. Yet after a short while, he walked over to Ling Han and said, "Honorable customer, could you give up your table?" Ling Han frowned and asked, "Why do I have to give up my table?" Honorable customer. Do you not know the 4 of them? That's young Master Kong and his friends. They are not to be trifled with. I am asking this for your own good." The waiter looked at Ling Han with a shocked expression, looking like he was very surprised that Ling Han did not know this young Master Kong. "No, and I don't intend to know." Ling Han shook his head. "Serve the dishes quickly. Perhaps after I have dined for about an hour, I'll leave, and there will be an empty spot by then." About an hour. The waiter gave a bitter smile. If he really had to wait for about an hour, then that young Master Kong would probably have their restaurant torn apart. However, first come first serve. That was the most basic rule. If the restaurant could not even guarantee this, then who would want to come here to dine in future? He could only force himself to speak with young Master Kong. After another while, that young Master Kong and his friends approached Ling Han. "Poor fool, take this 100 silver coins and get lost," young Master Kong commanded, a disdainful expression on his face. Chapter 137. Bastard. A monetary note was tossed onto the table. It was indeed a monetary note worth 100 silver coins. Ling Han gave a faint smile. Since there was someone deliberately giving him money, then he would of course not refuse. He said, "Waiter, did you hear that? Someone is treating me to a meal, so why don't you quickly serve some fine wine and dishes?" Fuck! Young Master Kong was extremely furious. This brat accepted his money and was still not getting lost? He placed his right hand onto the table and threatened, "Poor fool, if you don't want to get beaten up, you'd better get lost quickly." In the Imperial City, in a public place, even a prodigal young master like him would not dare to openly threaten the life of someone else. Ling Han turned his head to look left, then turned to look right, and asked, "Where is this barking coming from?" "Wong wong wong. What an irritating noise." "A poochie," sound was heard. Someone could not hold back their laughter at this. The laugh was a crisp sound, having a captivating feeling that could not be described by mere words, and instantly caused quite a number of people to turn around to look at the source of the laugh. The one who had laughed was an extremely beautiful young woman, about 23 or 24 years old. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, and her features were clearly defined as if they were shaped by a knife. This woman had a very unique bearing. Because she was seated, there was no way to see how shapely her figure was, but when one saw how her breasts were big enough to block one's eyes from continuing to move down the rest of her body, one should know how impressive her figure should be. All of a sudden, everyone was stunned by her beauty. What was even stranger was that such an outstanding beauty had been sitting here for so long, yet they had only realized it now. But they quickly realized the reason why. There was a piece of light muslin on the table of this beauty. Most likely, when she came in, her face was veiled. It was only when she began to eat that she removed her veil, so she did not attract much attention. Moreover, this beauty was definitely not an ordinary person. There were 3 large sturdy men dressed all in black seated together with her at the same table. They did not have any particular expression on their faces, but it was obvious they were her bodyguards, because only the beauty was holding chopsticks, while the other 3 were sitting very alertly. The reason why they had not been standing behind the beauty was obviously not to attract unnecessary attention. However, their cold expressions and uniform clothing was enough to attract attention. Young Master Kong was also staring at the beauty, and could not help reveal a perverted expression. He asked the beauty, "Beauty, what's your name?" The beauty did not answer, but one of the men in black waved a hand at young Master Kong, as if he was shooing away a fly. Young Master Kong had the feeling like he was about to go crazy. Just now, a young man actually dared to ignore him, and now another person was waving his hand at him to chase him away. What was going on here? Could it be that after a single night, the Imperial City was no longer the Imperial City he knew? How dare you be so insolent towards young Master Kong? One of the friends of young Master Kong stepped out and shouted loudly at that man in black. There was no change in expression on the man's face. He only took out a golden plaque from his robes, and once again made a shooing motion. Whatever plaque that is, it's useless. Our young Master Kong dash. Pa! That scoundrel friend was just about to brag about young Master Kong, yet never thought that he would be suddenly given a heavy slap. He looked at young Master Kong in disbelief, because the one who had slapped him was precisely young Master Kong. If you want to die, don't drag me along with you. Young Master Kong cursed at him furiously, and then turned to the man in black. His expression had instantly become very respectful and said, "This master, please forgive this Kong Wen Hui for his blindness." Hiss! All the people in the restaurant were astonished. Had this young Master Kong been bewitched or something like that? He had first slapped his own lackey, and was now taking the initiative to apologize? There was only one possibility. Then the other group had a far bigger background than the Kong clan, so even the young master of the Kong clan could only bow his head humbly in front of them. The man in black still did not speak, and only waved his hand a third time. This time, young Master Kong dared not disobey. He left with his tail between his legs, and did not even take back the monetary note worth 100 silver coins. He was already scared out of his wits. Everyone could not help but look at that plaque. What kind of identity did that plaque represent that even young Master Kong was scared off by it? I remember now, one of the customers exclaimed in surprise, but he immediately used his hands to cover his mouth, a terrified expression appearing on his face. Hey, just tell me quietly, what does that plaque represent? That's right, tell us. The man who shouted just now looked over at them, but when he saw that there was no visible reaction from the three men in black as if they could care less, she said bravely, "They are the palace guards, the Black Cloud Army." All of a sudden, the entire restaurant became completely silent. The words Black Cloud Army seemed to have power by themselves, causing everyone to tremble in fear. And that was exactly the truth of the matter. The Black Cloud Army were the Imperial Guards of the Imperial family, and they were the most elite unit. All the members of this army were elite martial artists. More importantly, they had the power to kill without punishment. In the Imperial City, even the spiritual pedestal tier elites of the 8 great clans could not simply murder anyone they disliked. As the saying goes, a country has its laws and a family its rules. However, the Black Cloud Army could do so as long as they thought that a person could possibly become a threat to the safety of the Imperial family. Thus, even a person as arrogant as young Master Kong could only run away as fast as he could. Otherwise, if he was killed, he'd have died for nothing. Everyone else became even more curious. Who exactly was this outstandingly beautiful woman that she would have 3 members of the Black Cloud Army stay by her side to protect her? From her looks, she was alluring, voluptuous, and very mature, so she should not be an innocent maiden anymore. Thus, she should not be a princess or something of the sort. Could she be one of the imperial consorts? When they thought about this, everyone immediately cast their eyes elsewhere. This was the emperor's woman. If anyone dared to look at her for too long, who knows, they might have their eyes removed. Yet why had a woman of the Rain Emperor left the palace? Ling Han swept his eyes over the 3 members of the Black Cloud Army and that beautiful woman, and was slightly surprised. Those 3 members of the Black Cloud Army were only in Gushing Spring tier, yet the beautiful woman was actually in Spiritual Ocean tier. A woman in her early 20s was already in Spiritual Ocean tier? That was really too unbelievable. This woman should have used some kind of medicine to preserve her beauty, and her real age should be at least 27 or 28. Otherwise, she should not be a citizen of Rain Country, but must have come from some major sect outside of Rain Country. That would not be strange then. One by one, the customers all settled their bills and left. To be in the same room as 3 members of the Black Cloud Army that could kill without suffering any kind of punishment. Just thinking about it made their hair stand on ends and lose any appetite they might have had. Ling Han's dishes were also served. He began to eat without care. Sounds of music were suddenly heard, and soon footsteps could be heard coming up the stairs. Very soon, the owners of the footsteps had arrived on the second floor. They were an old man and a young girl. The old man had a slightly stooped figure and had a goatee, while his hands held onto a huqin. The young girl was dressed in coarse clothing, but her poor attire was unable to hide her shapely figure. She wore no makeup, but her face was refreshingly beautiful and extremely gorgeous. In terms of beauty, she was only slightly inferior when compared to Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. Jia, the old man found a spot and sat, then began to play his huqin, whereas the young girl began to sing along to the music. Her singing voice was sinuous and melodious, causing anyone who listened to be unknowingly captivated by her voice. Even the 3 members of the Black Cloud Army who had not spoken or smiled at all could not help but show moved expressions and captivated eyes when they heard the naturally beautiful singing voice of the young girl. Ling Han, meanwhile, gave a sigh. Looks like he would not be able to enjoy this meal in peace. He had sensed killing intent. Chapter 138. Assassination. The old man looked up, and when his eyes fell upon the beautiful woman, the music took a different note. The music that had been sinuous like springtime in the month of March and a young girl that had been declaring words of love to her beloved, had become harsh in a single instant, as if announcing the marching of military troops on their way to attack their enemies, resounding with a predatory air. The young girl had also changed. The song she was singing changed, and she sang a song of inciting strength and attack. At the same time, she began to dance as if she was practicing sword techniques, and though there was no sword in her hands, she displayed the grandness of a skilled swordsman. The area she was moving in became wider and wider, and she got nearer and nearer to that beautiful woman. The song resounded, and like an ocean's wave, captured the hearts and minds of those who listened. The only unexpected factor was Ling Han. His divine sense was not only stronger than any normal element gathering tier martial artist, he also possessed the martial heart of a heaven tier elite, and was most able to protect his heart and mind. So the real intention was revealed now. The young girl had neared the beautiful woman in her dance when her right hand suddenly waved and a bright sword appeared in her hand, which swept towards the beautiful woman. With this one slash, she looked like a fairy descended from the heavens, too beautiful for words. I already expected it would be you people. It was at this moment that the beautiful woman suddenly slammed her hand onto the table. Pa! And a table made of high-quality rosewood was instantly turned into pieces. The broken pieces of wood shot towards the young girl as if they were arrows shot from a bow, and though the beautiful woman had made her move later, the broken pieces of wood reached the young girl first. Ding, ding, ding. The young girl waved her sword and parried away the pieces of wood. However, it was also at this moment that the 3 members of the Black Cloud Army came back to themselves. They all wore expressions of shock, because they had reacted much too slowly. If they had been the targets of the young girl's assassination plot, then they would have died from their carelessness. How dare you! The 3 men shouted furiously in unison as they all drew their respective weapons and charged at the young girl. Who cares if you are an outstandingly beautiful woman? Anyone who dared to make a move against an imperial consort would have committed a crime of high treason, and would have all their relatives executed with them as punishment. 3 smelly bugs! The young girl's eyes turned cold, her sword swept forward in an arc, and instantly, 3 flashes of sword chi shot out. What? The 3 members of the Black Cloud Army gasped in shock. 3 flashes of sword chi meant that this young girl was already in the ranks of rulers. The young girl was obviously a high-level gushing spring-tier elite, and the terrifying power of her sword chi was not something that could be withstood by these 3 men. As the sword chi danced unhindered, pu, a wound appeared on the chests of the 3 men and blood gushed forth. They were killed in a single instant. The young girl gave a light whistle, and continued to attack the beautiful woman. Murder! Those few customers who had remained in the restaurant finally came back to reality, and they all shouted in shock as they all fled downstairs. Little sister, so you people are the ones who used the falling flower command to lure this big sister out? The beautiful woman giggled. She did not stand up, but simply used her bare hands to defend herself and solidly blocked the young girl's sharp blade. When one looked closely, there was a pale light wrapped around both her hands. Every time her hands clashed with the sword, the light would brighten and block any damage that could possibly be inflicted by the sharp blade. The young girl did not respond. She simply increased the power of her attacks, and every slash was swift and fierce. Little sister, Which one is your master? The beautiful woman looked very calm. She was in spiritual ocean tier, and was completely dominant over the young girl who was only in gushing spring tier, so she naturally appeared to be completely at ease. Chong! The old man who had been playing the huqin by the side stopped playing his music. He pounced and also leaped towards the beautiful woman. He waved his right hand, and a few strings of the huqin flew forwards to coil around the beautiful woman. Ancient thousand silk threads? The beautiful woman narrowed her eyes before smiling softly, and said, "You are not this big sister's type. Big sister does not like to be tied up by you. If you were a handsome man, then big sister would be a little interested." These two people were obviously assassins. There was no change in their expressions when faced with their opponents, flirting. On the other hand, their attacks were quick and forceful, and they moved in well-practiced coordination. However, they were both only in gushing spring tier. Even if they were in the 9th layer of gushing spring tier, how could they be a match against a spiritual ocean tier elite? The beautiful woman only slightly increased the effort she was putting into this battle, and it was enough to cause these two people to face danger on all sides. Never thought about it, right? I betrayed and left the falling flower court, yet my cultivation level has broken through to spiritual ocean tier. She laughed lightly. Her figure moved lightly, but her attacks became faster and more powerful. If a spiritual ocean tier elite became serious, how could mere gushing spring tier martial artists stand against her? The two assassins were instantly in dire straits, and looked to be trapped in a very difficult situation. "I only need one person to go back and report," the beautiful woman revealed a cold killing intent. "Go and tell that be Hua Wu Yu, that when I break through to spiritual pedestal tier, that would be the day that be has to surrender her head." Her killing intent blazed, and her attacks were even more ruthless. The old man and the young girl exchanged a look before they each stretched out a hand to hold on to each other. Instantly, there was an indescribable power circulating, and there actually appeared an inconceivable increase to their battle prowess, which helped them withstand the beautiful woman's killing moves one after another. Ling Han was astounded as he thought, was this 2 hearts beat as one? This was a secret technique that could force out 10 times the amount of potential two people had. However, when the technique's effects ended, these two people who had used the technique would experience a setback in their cultivation levels. This technique belonged to the last resort category of martial arts techniques. However, the 2 hearts beat as one technique had very strict requirements for its use. The two people who used this technique had to be siblings, but there was such a large gap between the ages of these two people, so how could it be possible that they were siblings? While he was still feeling surprised, the two assassins obviously knew they were no match for the beautiful woman. Only managing to withstand a few attacks from the beautiful woman, they suddenly leaped out the window, fleeing off into the distance. The beautiful woman chased after them too and stood by the window, watching the spot the two assassins had vanished at, but made no move to continue her pursuit. The people who had been walking on the streets had heard the window break and they all turned to look up. However, what they saw was an extremely beautiful woman standing from the window. As a light breeze blew, her silken garments were tightly wrapped around her shapely figure, clearly outlining her voluptuous body, and the passers-by could not help but salivate at this sight. This was indeed an extremely captivating beauty. The beautiful woman turned back round and cast a look at Ling Han and said, "Little brother, you are really quite brave not to flee." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I'm so scared that my legs have become weak. Even if I want to flee, I can't." Giggle! The beautiful woman covered her mouth and laughed. The beauty trembled in her humor, and had an indescribable allure to her. Big sister is fond of your type, having a sweet mouth for flattery and a good sense of humor. What a pity that big sister is already married. Her figure suddenly leaped out the window, completely ignoring the corpses of the 3 members of Black Cloud Army. The most vicious is a woman's heart. Ling Han shivered internally. Just now, that beautiful woman had actually borne killing intent towards him, but for some reason, gave up on her intention. Just having a simple meal and things could become so hair-raising. This really made him lost for words. Ling Han rose up from his seat and left. This had nothing to do with him. He did not have the free time to concern himself with unnecessary matters. This was an area directly under the control of the Emperor, and 3 members of the Black Cloud Army had died, so it was a very serious matter. In mere moments, the whole imperial city was completely on alert. One infantry troop after another was seen patrolling the streets, searching for the location of the two assassins. After Ling Han returned to the Huyang Academy and entered his courtyard, his brow immediately creased into a frown. Someone had touched his restriction and had entered his courtyard. Shwa! A bright light flashed, and a sword was pointing right at his chest. A beautiful young girl appeared. "Don't make any noise or else I will kill you." Chapter 139. Rookie. This young girl actually happened to be one of the assassins at the restaurant. Ling Han's expression became strange. This was really too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? This young girl was actually hiding at his place. But when he thought about it, Huyang Academy was indeed the best place for them to avoid their pursuers. Moreover, this was the most secluded, desolate corner of Huyang Academy. So it wasn't really too much of a coincidence that this pair of assassins had found their way here. He smiled calmly and said, "I do not like someone pointing their sword at me." "Hang, even if you don't like it, you'll have to like it now," the young girl declared a little naively, not showing the slightest bit of sign that she was a cold-blooded assassin. Ling Han stretched out a finger, pressed down on the sword's blade, and said, "You have just used 2 hearts beat as 1 technique. Do you even have a single % of your battle prowess left?" His physical body had already surpassed the level of body of dead tree, and was nearing the level of body of rock cliff. Even if he was not circulating origin power to increase his defenses, there was no way the sharp blade of the sword was able to wound his finger. He gave a flick of his finger, and the sword immediately swept to another side. "This is much better." The corners of his lips turned up into a smile. The young girl could not hold back an expression of surprise, and asked, "How did you know we used 2 hearts beat as 1 technique? That isn't some kind of incredible secret technique." Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he did not have any siblings. Thus, even when he had obtained this technique, he only took one look at it and tossed it aside right after. He only knew the use of the secret technique as well as its drawback, but could not recall its exact details. "Hang, even if we only have a single % of our original battle prowess left, it would be more than enough to take care of a mere 6th layer of element-gathering tier martial artist like you," the young girl said, unconvinced, and once again raised her sword to point at him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "If you misbehave, I'll smack your bottom." "Scoundrel!" A red blush immediately rose up on the pretty face of the young girl, and her sword suddenly shot towards Ling Han in an attack. If this young girl's battle prowess had not dropped, then Ling Han would really have not dared to receive her attack head-on. After all, the 7th layer of gushing spring tier was much stronger than him. But there may not even be 1,000th of her initial battle prowess left. What more a single %? Additionally, he was a freak whose battle prowess allowed him to stand equal with the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. In simpler terms, the result was that he was at an advantage in terms of battle prowess. Bing! 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 A few punches from Ling Han, and the sword was successfully flung out of the young girl's hands. Ding! And the sword was firmly stabbed into the ground, swaying from side to side. "Will you only behave after getting your bottom smacked?" Ling Han deliberately put on a severe expression. The young girl was so scared that her face had gone pale. Why was she so unlucky? This was her first mission, and it had failed impressively. Moreover, she had only escaped the wolf's den, but had entered into the tiger's lair. Xiao! Another figure flew out. It was the old man, the other assassin. As his hands waved, the threads of the huqin danced, as if they were silk threads, winding towards Ling Han. "Old man, though I have respect for the elderly, but if you flaunt your seniority in front of me, I will not be polite either," Ling Han declared as he used his fists to parry the old man's attacks. Due to his powerful defenses and sturdy physical body, those huqin threads that should have been able to cut through metals could do nothing against his bare fists. The young girl also advanced with her sword in hand. The two of them moved in well-practiced coordination, and when they combined forces, their collective battle prowess not only doubled, but increased by 2 to 3 times. However, their battle prowess had suffered a drastic setback, and along with the fact that their opponent was a monster like Ling Han, they were still suppressed to the extent that they couldn't even fight back even if they just joined forces. The two of them could not help but feel extremely astounded. Even if their battle prowess had dropped drastically, if they combined forces, their power should be more than enough to dominate over any 9th layer of element-gathering tier martial artist. Yet this young man in front of them was really monstrously strong. He actually managed to turn the tables on them to suppress them. If you misbehave, then you'll be thrashed. Ling Han's foot kicked out and hit directly on the young girl's bottom, kicking her some distance away before throwing a punch onto the old man's chest, also forcing him to fly off some distance away from him. But after he had thrown this punch, Ling Han's expression became a little strange. There was something off about that feeling. He walked towards the old man who was already lying down on the ground, now only able to moan in pain. Ling Han felt about the old man's face, and suddenly tore off a thin mask with a tear. The old man's appearance changed greatly in that single instant, and actually revealed an angry-looking beautiful young face that looked quite similar with a young girl's face. No wonder. Ling Han finally understood. Just now, he was still feeling curious about how there could be such a large age gap between this pair of brother and sister. Now it looks like the elder brother wasn't the elder brother at all, but an elder sister who had simply disguised herself as an old man. Lecher! The elder sister shouted in anger, a furious blush on her face, before actually fainting from her rage. Ling Han sighed. He had not deliberately attacked her breast. Who asked this girl to disguise himself as an old man? Sister! After the disguise was exposed, the young girl made no more attempts to gloss things over, and immediately called out. Unfortunately, the kick that Ling Han delivered just now was really very heavy. Her bottom felt like it was burning even now. She had just gotten up before falling down to sit on the ground again. How troublesome! Ling Han sighed again. Do you two not have some other place to hide that you must come here to add on to my troubles? The young girl put on an expression as if she had been wronged. If they had known that there was a perverted lecher living here, they wouldn't have come here even if they were beaten to death. Hey, 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 cursing someone in your heart is not a good thing to do, Ling Han said. How did you know? The young girl asked in shock, an adorable expression on her face. With your kind of temperament, you want to be an assassin? Ling Han only felt that the master of these two sisters was really too much of a failure to actually train this kind of assassins. Their master should practically hit himself with a piece of tofu, thus committing suicide. What do you care? The young girl humphed and ignored him. Watch out, or I will smack your bottom. Ling Han threatened. You dare! The young girl was once again so scared by his threat that her face had turned pale. Usually, she had her elder sister to protect her, but now that her sister was unconscious, she suddenly felt at a loss. You two only know how to give me trouble. Ling Han shook his head. He stretched out a hand, grabbed the collar of the elder sister, and walked over to pick up the younger sister before entering his house. What do you want to do? The younger sister had turned pale from fear. Was this guy going to commit a crime of lust in broad daylight? Hee, what do you think? Ling Han asked, deliberately putting on a wicked expression. The younger sister was so scared her eyes rolled in the back of her head, and actually fainted too. I give up. They are like this, and they want to become assassins. Ling Han shook his head. At first, when he saw the well-coordinated movements of these two girls, and how well-practiced they were, he had thought they were experienced assassins. But in the end, they were mere rookies. He tossed the two girls into Hunyo's room. He thought for a while, then moved Hunyo's egg into his own room. Who knows when the little girl would hatch out of her egg? After a short while, the pair of sisters awoke, and when they discovered they were fully dressed and there was nothing off with their appearances, they both felt relieved. Sister, let's take advantage of that guy not being here, and quickly flee, the younger sister said. How do we flee? The elder sister said with a bitter smile. After we used 2 hearts beat as 1, we forced ourselves into another battle. Can you even use origin power now? If we go out now and fall into the hands of those smelly men, I would rather die. But that guy is really bad, always saying that he's going to smack my bottom, the younger sister said, feeling very wronged. That person's eyes look very clear, so I don't think he's that kind of person. The elder sister shook her head. Sister, don't forget that he groped your breast just now. The younger sister pointed out this fact. Stupid girl, don't talk nonsense. I was punched by him. The elder sister quickly argued. What's the difference? The younger sister mumbled. Ling Han had just pushed open the door and entered, and could not stop his face from twitching. This pair of sisters were even more amateurish than he had thought. Chapter 140. The Whole Story. When they saw Ling Han come in, both sisters put on guarded expressions. Just now they could somehow still have the ability to fight, but now they were really like fish upon a chopping block, completely at the mercy of others. Ling Han moved a stool closer to them, sat down and said, "Why don't you tell me your story?" Both girls shook their heads at the same time, and the younger sister even declared stubbornly, "Death is better than being insulted. Just kill us." "All right, since you two are so determined to die, then I'll give you a hand." Ling Han nodded and stood. The two sisters looked like they were not afraid of death and exposed their necks to receive a killing blow, but their tightly gripped hands betrayed them who would not be afraid when facing death. Ling Han rubbed his chin and said, "You two are quite good-looking. To just kill the two of you seems to be too much of a waste." How can you be so untrustworthy?" the two sisters declared angrily. "Kill us quickly." Ling Han could not help being amused, and asked, "So what if I am untrustworthy?" "You won't get a good end," the younger sister said with a pale face. Ling Han laughed loudly, and asked the elder sister, "Bringing along a silly little girl like this is a lot of pressure, isn't it?" You even insulted me?" The younger sister only felt extremely wronged. This young man either insulted her, or scared her. He was really too despicable. Moreover, he didn't look much older than herself, yet kept referring to her as a little girl, pretending to be so much more mature. "Tell me your names, or I will smack your bottoms," Ling Han threatened. "Hang, I won't tell," the younger sister declared stubbornly. "I am Lu Feng Er, and she is my younger sister, Lu Ru Er," the elder sister said. "Sister, why did you tell him? We would rather die than submit," the younger sister, Lu Ru Er, declared with a pout. "What about the person you want to kill?" Ling Han asked. "Her name is Xueqi. She used to be a member of our Falling Flower Court, but is now our enemy." This time, Lu Ru Er snatched the chance to answer first. Since there was no possibility of rather die than submit anymore, then there was no way that an outspoken person like her could hide any secrets. "Why?" Ling Han asked. He truly felt that his curious nature was much too strong. This had nothing to do with him at all. Xueqi used to be the top assassin of our Falling Flower Court, but she actually allied herself with an outsider, charged into our Falling Flower Court, and killed almost all the members of our Falling Flower Court. Although the two of us sisters are all that is left of the Falling Flower Court, we will definitely make this traitor repay with her life. Lu Ru Er made an impassioned declaration, her head held high. "Pa!" Ling Han flicked her forehead, which caused the young girl to hold onto her head in pain as she looked at Ling Han with murderous eyes. "You tell me." Ling Han turned to look at the elder sister. "We come from Fire Country, and Falling Flower Court is an organization of assassins. Since young, us two sisters were taken in by our grand elder as disciples. Xueqi collaborated with the imperial family of Fire Country, and practically massacred the entire Falling Flower Court. Elder Hua managed to save the two of us and flee, but her injuries were much too severe. She only managed to last for a few years, and died last year," Lu Feng Er said. Her explanation was clear and methodical, unlike her younger sister's disorganized explanation. The latter didn't even care if her audience understood her or not. And the reason why Xueqi had committed such crimes was only because she wanted to steal a treasure of the Falling Flower Court, a staying youth pill. After she got it, she made her way to Rain Country, and using some unknown methods, actually became an imperial consort of the Rain Emperor, gifted with the honorable name of Consort Yun. We used the token that she had left behind to lure her out, but never thought that after a mere 5 years, that woman actually broke through to spiritual ocean tier, making our plans fail at the final step. Ling Han was astounded. Just for the sake of a staying youth pill, she actually became hostile and cruel enough to destroy the sect that had nurtured her for years? But when he thought about it, there were indeed some women who placed as much importance on their beauty as on their very lives. For these women, they could sacrifice anything as long as they could preserve their beauty. But this Xueqi really did have her ways to actually manage to clear her history of bloodshed and murder, and actually become an imperial consort of Rain Country. "You can rest here and wait for your wounds to recover. When you are recovered, you must immediately leave. Do not drag me into this," he said. Lu Ru Er looked extremely surprised, and asked, "Why are you helping us?" Ling Han laughed and said deliberately, "Of course, it's because the two of you are so beautiful, so you can pay me back by marrying me in future.
Hang, I will not accept you.
Lu Ru'er immediately declared proudly. Silly girl. Ling Han shook his head. After understanding the whole situation, he had naturally lost the interest in continuing the conversation, so he turned around and left the room. The reason why he was willing to help them was because he was displeased with Xueqi. That woman actually bore killing intent towards him. Of course he would have to go against her. Although there were another 2 mouths to feed added like this, compared with Hunyo's colossal appetite, there was not much difference whether these 2 sisters were here or not. The amount of food consumed would not attract anyone's suspicion. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Ling Han took medicine every day and so his cultivation advanced very rapidly. However, all medicine had a poisonous component, so even though he had concocted a large amount of alchemical pills, he could only take 1 or 2 pills per day. Otherwise, the natural poison content in these medicines could accumulate in his body and the result would be unthinkable. The Lu sisters recovered very slowly. Using the 2 hearts beat as one technique to force out their potential was harmful to their foundation, and no medicine would be of any help to any wound to a person's foundation. Even if there was, the medicine would at least have to be earth grade and above. Ling Han was not that generous to get some earth grade pills for these 2 sisters. There was a slight change to the egg that Hunyo had transformed into. The original white color had turned red, and he could vaguely see a crimson light flickering within, as if the little girl was about to hatch out of the egg soon. Those who had ventured to the site of that ancient battleground also returned one by one. The godly medicine had fled, the spiritual tools had flown off, and they had already gotten whatever they should have gotten. Whatever they didn't get, they had no way to get hold of anyways, so what was the use of continuing to stay there? At night, the 3rd Imperial Prince earnestly invited Ling Han to join him at Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Ling Han had quite a good impression of this Imperial Prince, so he decided to give the latter some face and accept the invitation. The Cherishing Flower Pavilion was the most luxurious money-squandering establishment of the Imperial City. Anyone with any slightest bit of social status would choose to receive guests here, because there was not only food made from valuable ingredients and excellent wine here, but also female attendants who had gone through strict training. These women were all extremely beautiful, and came with various bearings. It could be said that their bearing and beauty completely enabled them to pass themselves off as any princess of the various great clans. This naturally satisfied the hearts of all men who sought novelty as they chased after these female attendants. However, there was too strict a requirement to enter into this Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Even clansmen of minor clans had no right to enter into this place. The establishment would not accept their money to lower the entry requirement. But, the more exclusive it was, the more popular the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was. One could not help but sigh at how well the owner of this establishment could grasp human psychology. The 3rd Imperial Prince did not only invite Ling Han. He also invited a lot of other young elites. He had reserved a courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion for his gathering, proving how very liberal he was with money. Merely the expenses for this one night would be enough for an ordinary family to live their entire lives in comfort. Ling Han strolled and arrived at the entrance of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. There were 2 exquisitely beautiful servant girls standing at the entrance to receive customers. They were tall and slender, and were very high grade in terms of appearance. Big brother Ling? A voice filled with surprise suddenly called out from behind him. Ling Han turned around and saw a young man and woman standing side by side. He could not help but show a smile and said, Li Hao Xueqi. It really is you. Li Hao and Zhu Xueqi both smiled, and quickly approached him. He. Should I be congratulating you for finally winning the maiden's heart? Ling Han raised his clasped hands in Li Hao's direction, causing this guy to instantly show an expression of embarrassment, but there was no way to hide his joy either. Chapter 141. Drawing Saber in Anger. Ling Han only thought for a short while, and managed to figure out the key factor in this issue. Li Hao managed to enter Huyang Academy, and was practically guaranteed a bright future ahead of him. The Zhu clan had to be worried that Li Hao would experience a change of heart after witnessing the dazzling and extravagant lifestyle of the imperial city, and so had Zhu Xueqi follow him here. However, this couple seemed to have finally broken through the last layer separating them, and their relationship has naturally proceeded smoothly. When Ling Han saw this, he nodded internally. happy for them as well. Big brother Ling, I kept looking for you after I entered into the academy, yet couldn't find you at all, Li Hao said, a little guilty. Ling Han laughed loudly and joked, you probably haven't spent too much time searching, right? Always lovey-dovey with Xueqi, and so didn't manage to find me, right? Li Hao's face turned crimson. The feelings between himself and Xueqi had only been a hazy, indistinct kind of affection, and neither of them had dared to speak of their feelings openly. After reaching the imperial city, the two of them only had each other, and were very far away from home, so their affections naturally increased drastically, wanting nothing more than to cling to each other at all times. Big brother Ling, you're always such a teaser, Xueqi said, acting like a spoiled child, dispersing the awkwardness Li Hao was feeling. Li Hao smiled faintly. Li Hao was a bit wooden in character and slow in speech, while Xueqi was much livelier. The two of them would be able to compensate for one another's shortcomings. Poor fool! It was at this moment that a light was heard from behind them, and a young man quickly approached them. It was the young master of the Kong clan. When he saw Ling Han, a cold smirk appeared on his face, and he said, "What a coincidence for me to see you here." He had been tricked out of 100 silver coins by Ling Han. Though this paltry sum of money was nothing much to him, the crux of the matter was that he was displeased. However, due to the sudden interception of Xueqi, he did not manage to find Ling Han to settle this grudge. "Young Master Kong, who's this guy?" A gorgeously dressed woman leaned closely and into young Master Kong's arms, casting a coy glance at him. "Oh, just a poor fool." Young Master Kong gave a wave of his hand, looking very disdainful. "Who are you calling a poor fool?" Li Hao had the short temper of a young man and could not hold himself back from retorting. Young Master Kong swept a glance over Li Hao and Xueqi, and a contemptuous expression appeared on his face, as he said, "You have just recently arrived at the Imperial City, haven't you?" "How did you know?" Li Hao blurted out. "Haha, just look at the air of a country bumpkin surrounding you. I'm sure you must have come out from some rural out-of-the-way place." The contempt on young Master Kong's face deepened, and as he stared at Xueqi he said, "However, this village girl does not look too bad. If properly dressed up, there might still be a bit of worth playing with her." "How dare you!" There was no way that Li Hao could tolerate his beloved being insulted like this, and immediately raised his fist in a punch towards young Master Kong. "Ah!" The beautiful girl instantly screamed. "Step aside." Young Master Kong shoved the beautiful girl to one side and raised his hands to receive Li Hao's attack. Bing! 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 The two of them had thus come to blows. Li Hao was in the 4th layer of Element Gathering Tier, while young Master Kong was in the 5th layer, so theoretically, young Master Kong should be stronger. However, his cultivation level was obviously built up through the use of various resources, so his martial arts foundation was not stable at all. From the look of things, young Master Kong's battle prowess was merely 4 stars. Thus, the two of them were at a tie. Their battle proceeded furiously, yet neither was able to get the upper hand. "Ha ha ha, never thought that a village boy would be able to have a bit of ability," young Master Kong said with a loud laugh. "Country boy, how about you lend me your woman to play with for a few days? Don't think it's a loss for you. With my careful teaching, your woman would be able to learn a lot of different moves, and let a country boy like you taste something new." Hearing him once again insult his woman, Li Hao's eyes turned red. He drew his saber in his anger, and aimed a slash towards young Master Kong. "What a good brat. You actually dare use weapons against me." Young Master Kong gave a humph, and similarly drew his sword and clashed with Li Hao. Li Hao gave a furious roar, and a flash of saber chi shot out like an enraged dragon, dancing towards young Master Kong. Young Master Kong's cultivation level of the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier was built up by force, so how was it possible that he would be able to defend himself against saber chi? Instantly, a panicked expression appeared on his face. Within a few moves, Li Hao's saber chi had already caused multiple wounds on his body, causing him to cry out in pain. "Stop! Stop!" he exclaimed in fear, quickly calling a ceasefire. He was not a person with an indomitable will. "Apologize!" Li Hao withdrew his saber, and shouted at young Master Kong. Young Master Kong's face turned ashen. For him to actually apologize to a country bumpkin. If this was known by others, what would happen to his reputation? But this country bumpkin was obviously a rash brat. If he clashed with him head-on, it was really possible that he would suffer. He was just about to temporarily humble himself in view of the situation when his eyes swept over the area, and instantly, joy appeared on his face. He called out, "Big Brother Tan, save me!" A tall, slender young man was slowly approaching them. This newcomer was quite handsome, and every move he made was overflowing with confidence. His name was Tan Xueqi, and he was a young clansman of one of the middle-class clans of the Imperial City. In the Imperial City, there were only 8 great clans to be qualified as a great clan. The clan needed to have a spiritual pedestal tier elite to oversee things. There were a lot more middle-class clans, because they only needed a spiritual ocean tier elite in their ranks. Meanwhile, there were countless minor clans, and they only needed a gushing spring tier martial artist to be qualified as a minor clan. While young Master Kong was respectfully addressed by others young master, the truth was that he only came from a minor clan. The Kong clan was deeply involved in business and commerce, so although the clan did not produce many elite martial artists, they had substantial wealth and were even richer than a large number of middle-class clans. Thus, young Master Kong knew quite a number of young masters from various middle-class clans. This was also his capital. At first, Tan Xueqi did not recognize young Master Kong, because the latter was really cutting a sorry figure at the moment. It was only when he took a closer look that he recognized the latter. He could not help but be shocked and asked, "Kong Wenhui?" "Big Brother Tan, it's me," Kong Wenhui replied, scowling miserably. "Why are you looking so miserable?" Tan Xueqi could not help but laugh out loud, for he had discovered that Kong Wenhui's opponent was merely in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Kong Wenhui glared fiercely at Li Hao, and said, "It's this country bumpkin. Just because he managed to form a flash of saber chi, he actually dares to be so arrogant in the Imperial City." "Oh?" Tan Xueqi glanced over at Li Hao, and a hint of disdain appeared on his face. He could tell with one glance that this was an outsider. The air of the rural countryside was practically hitting him in the face. As a member of one of the clans of the Imperial City, whether it was Kong Wenhui or Tan Xueqi, both had a natural kind of arrogance and pride, and looked down on anyone who came from outside the Imperial City. "Country bumpkin, kneel and kowtow to apologize." Tan Xueqi immediately said darkly to Li Hao, without even asking about how the conflict between the two of them had begun. He naturally would not have any qualms about doing so. What kind of background could a mere country bumpkin have in the Imperial City? Li Hao did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. The pressure that came from this person far surpassed the pressure he felt from Kong Wenhui. The former was at least in the late stage of element gathering tier. Though his saber chi could forcibly increase his battle prowess by another star, he was still no match for the 7th layer of element gathering tier and above. Unless Tan Xueqi was the same as Kong Wenhui, only having the cultivation level without stable foundations as support. A mere 4th layer of element gathering tier martial artist. "I would be able to dominate you with a single finger." Tan Xueqi humphed coldly and said haughtily, "I am in the 9th layer of element gathering tier." Li Hao's expression changed drastically. Even if this newcomer's cultivation level was also without proper foundations as support, the 9th layer of element gathering tier would still have at least 7 battle stars of battle prowess, and was still in the position to completely dominate over him. "Big Brother Hao, let's just forget it." Xueqi spoke up. Although Ling Han, based on his current battle prowess, need not fear any martial artist in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, this was still the Imperial City, after all. Who knows what kind of background these people come from? Chapter 142. Country Bumpkin. "Ha ha ha ha, so you people do know how you should behave." Tan Xueqi laughed coldly, "Then kneel down and apologize." "We can apologize, but we will definitely not kneel." Li Hao forced out through gritted teeth. This was his greatest concession, and if it was not because of Xueqi, he would rather fight to the death. A dark expression flickered across Tan Xueqi's face. He had already opened his mouth, yet this brat actually dared to refuse him. Indeed, he did not dare to kill anyone. No one would dare to commit murder in the Imperial City, though a fight was still fine. Even if he severely injured his opponent, with the power of the Tan clan behind him, things would still be easily smoothed over against a country bumpkin like this. One look at this guy and he knew that the former did not have any particularly important background, so what if he bullied and oppressed this country bumpkin?
You're only seeking your own suffering like this.
Tan Wei-chi humphed, and the aura of an elite warrior in the 9th layer of element gathering tier swept out, pressing down on Li Hao. Li Hao gritted his teeth and forced himself to face this pressure head-on, yet veins were continuously popping up on his forehead. This pressure was indeed too heavy. Hee, it's all right if you don't want to kneel. As long as you let your girlfriend remove all her clothes and give us a dance. We are all forgiving people here, and we'll give you a way out, Kong Wenhui said with a snicker. Xueqi shuddered. She did want to help Li Hao resolve the issue, but if she really did take off her clothes in public, how would she be able to face Li Hao in future? Oh, so you guys enjoy watching someone naked dance so much? Ling Han spoke up, a cool expression on his face. He was now angry. When he befriended someone, he would not care whether the person was strong or weak, or what kind of background they came from. They could not be stronger than how he had been in his last life, anyways. Li Hao and Xueqi had fought at his side quite a few times, so they could be considered to be old friends. A person like him, very much covered for his own people. The only reason he had not interfered previously was just because he wanted to see to what extent these two people would be seeking their own death. Haha, I'm only interested in watching women dance naked, not men dancing naked. Even if you want to dance naked, I will not watch it. Kong Wenhui stared at Xueqi. Though there were many such beauties of this level in the Imperial City, there were very few of them that were in element gathering tier. And any woman in element gathering tier in the Imperial City was not a character that he could meddle with. Thus, naturally, his heart was heated and a powerful desire to conquer such a woman rose up within him. Just dance in the street like this. 1 hour of naked dancing, and I will consider this matter settled, Ling Han said calmly.
Ha 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 ha.
Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wenhui exchanged a glance, before erupting into raucous laughter. They were laughing so hard, they were practically about to tear up. This was indeed a country bumpkin. He had to be used to being arrogant in a small place, and thought that this place was also his territory. Hang, this is the Imperial City. If a dragon came here, it would have to coil up. If a tiger came, it would have to lie on its stomach.
Brat, you really are naive.
Tan Wei-chi shook his head. I think he is more of an idiot, Kong Wenhui insulted. Big brother Ling, forget it. Let's just go. Xueqi said in a low voice. The waters in the Imperial City were too deep. There were people in Gushing Spring and even spiritual ocean tier at every turn. Definitely not people that those who had come from small places like them could trifle with. You still think you can leave? Kong Wenhui wanted to sweep away his previous cowardly behavior, and because Tan Wei-chi was beside him, he said coldly, Didn't you hear me tell you to dance naked? I've changed my mind. Now all 3 of you are to dance naked. Let's go. Don't bother with them. Xueqi and Li Hao both pulled on Ling Han's arm. They were very worried that Ling Han, with a young man's short temper, would come to blows with these two. They were local troublemakers of the Imperial City after all. Who knows what kind of terrifying background these two came from? However, this was still the area under the direct jurisdiction of the Emperor. No matter what, they would not dare to really thrash students of Huyang Academy. Ling Han smiled and said, Where are we going? I made a promise with someone to meet inside here. He pointed at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Brag. Just continue to brag. Tan Wei-chi interrupted. Country bumpkin, do you know what kind of place this is? This is Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Without a high enough status, no matter how much money you have, you would still be unable to step into these doors. Li Hao and Xueqi nodded internally. They have both heard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. It was indeed a trademark of the Imperial City, and would only serve that particular group of people that were the highest on the social ladder. No matter how wealthy ordinary people were, they would not be able to enter within. But they would of course not expose Ling Han, though they both agreed that Ling Han must be acting stubborn. That's right. Not even I have the privilege to enter. Kong Wenhui exclaimed. Though the Kong clan was indeed very wealthy, but their strongest clansmen were only in Gushing Spring tier. If he wanted to enter into Cherishing Flower Pavilion, he would need to at least have the support of a spiritual ocean tier elite. Country bumpkin, don't act stubborn anymore. Quickly take off your clothes and dance, then go back to your village to farm. He laughed loudly. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. He was now truly angered. Why is young Master Han standing outside? It was at this moment that a melodious female voice was heard, and from within the cherishing flower pavilion, a crimson-haired beauty walked out. Her figure was very shapely, and she had a captivating, hypnotizing beauty to her. It was the beauty that was always by the side of the third imperial prince. Her name was Ziyan.
Yo!
When Kong Wenhui's eyes fell upon her, his eyes lit up. How could he know that she was someone at the side of the third imperial prince? He thought that she was one of the female attendants of the cherishing flower pavilion, and could not help but say foolishly, "Beauty, how much is it for a single night?" "Hee, it's all right even if the two of us share you, right? Price is no issue." The crimson-haired beauty's eyes instantly narrowed, and a dark killing intent immediately emanated from her.
Pa!
Tan Wei-Chi's hand rose and fell, giving Kong Wenhui a heavy slap as he cursed. "Bastard, if you want to die, don't drag me along with you." He quickly bowed towards the crimson-haired beauty and said, "Greetings, Miss Ziyan." Kong Wenhui had no idea why he was slapped, but he was not an idiot. When he saw the drops of sweat covering Tan Wei-Chi's forehead, he could guess that this Miss Ziyan came from a formidable background that was at least greater than the Tan clan behind Tan Wei-Chi. Ziyan did not pay them any attention, and turned towards Ling Han instead, asking with a sweet smile, "Young Master Han, do you have some kind of conflict with these two?"
Hiss!
Tan Wei-Chi had already been shivering due to fear in the first place, and now his heart tightened even further. When Ziyan called young Master Han the first time, he had not thought that she was addressing Ling Han because he did not know Ling Han's name. Furthermore, he did not think that a country bumpkin was worthy of being received personally by a favored person of the third imperial prince, who even addressed him as young Master Han. Yet this time, Miss Ziyan was facing Ling Han directly, and addressing him as such. "It's over. It's all over." For even Miss Ziyan to be so respectful towards him, this was proof that this brat must have come from an overwhelmingly powerful background. Tan Wei-Chi only felt his whole body was ready to collapse, and could not control his legs from shaking. He almost did not even have the energy left to remain standing. Kong Wenhui, on the other hand, was not so scared, because he did not know who Ziyan was. As the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. Li Hao and Xueqi were both shocked too. They did not know who this young woman was, but from the moment she appeared, she was able to force Tan Wei-Chi to lower his head, so she must have obviously come from a terrifying background. But even so, she still had to address Ling Han as young Master Han. Ling Han had only been in the imperial city for a few days, and he had already reached such a high level on the social ladder. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "These two guys humiliated my friends." Ziyan's beautiful face instantly turned cold, and swept her eyes over Tan Wei-Chi and Kong Wenhui. The aura of a gushing spring tear elite rolled out, causing the hearts of these two to beat like crazy, almost ready to pop out of their throats. "Are you not going to apologize to young Master Han and his friends?" Chapter 143. Dance Obediently. Tan Wei-Chi immediately lowered his head in apology, and said, "Young Master Han, please forgive me for my blindness." Although Kong Wenhui was displeased, when he saw that even Tan Wei-Chi had bowed his head, how could he still dare to remain standing upright? He too bowed his head and said, "I was wrong. Please forgive me, young Master Han." "Get lost!" Ziyan shouted in rebuke and pointed. The two of them were thanking the gods for their good fortune in their hearts as they prepared to make a break for it. "Who allowed you to leave?" Ling Han asked. Ziyan could not help but show a sliver of displeasure on her face. She was the third imperial prince's most trusted, and in the whole imperial city, who would not greet her respectfully as Miss Ziyan? Yet though she had already stepped out as mediator, Ling Han would still not let the matter go. Wasn't this deliberately not giving her face in public? Both Tan Wei-Chi and Kong Wenhui were experts at observing the faces of others, and were instantly delighted. As long as Ling Han and Ziyan came into conflict, then they would be immediately getting back the upper hand. Meanwhile, Li Hao and Xueqi both became anxious, nervous about the imperious way Ling Han was acting. "What other command does young Master Han have?" Tan Wei-Chi asked respectfully. He knew that the more respectful he appeared to be now, and the more overbearing Ling Han acted, the more dislike would be incited from Ziyan. "I've already said so. The two of you dance an hour naked here, and we'll forget about the matter today," Ling Han said. Young Master Han, death is better than humiliation. In terms of petty scheming, Kong Wenhui was obviously also an expert, and immediately cooperated very well with Tan Wei-chi, deliberately showing an extremely angered expression. Who would believe that it was him who had first suggested for Xueqi to dance naked now? Indeed, the displeasure on Ziyan's face deepened. She had not witnessed the incident from start to finish, and only knew what she was seeing now. Obviously, Ling Han was behaving too imperiously. However, Ling Han was someone the third imperial prince wanted very much to befriend after all, so she did not dare to offend him either. She said, "Young Master Han, isn't that too much? Why not let them prepare some gifts and personally pay you a visit tomorrow to express their deepest apologies to young Master Han and your friends? We shall heed Miss Ziyan's instructions." Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wenhui instantly nodded with respect. Big Brother Ling, let's just forget it. Li Hao and Zhu Xueqi advised as well. Ling Han was not moved and said, "There is no need for such trouble. As long as they dance naked here today, then we'll consider the matter settled. Don't go too far. I don't believe you dare to kill us." Kong Wenhui shouted, intending to spur Ling Han into action. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "The Empire has laws, who would dare to disobey? However, you two are only minor characters. The best option for you would be to dance obediently. Otherwise, I will rip off all your clothes and leave you to hang in this street for 3 days and 3 nights. Young Master Han." Ziyan could not help but interrupt, a sliver of coldness appearing on her beautiful face. "What is it? You disagree?" Ling Han turned to look at her. "Ha ha ha ha, how could that be?" A bout of laughter was heard, and the third imperial prince strode out. "These two actually dare to delay the meeting between Brother Ling and myself. How could they simply be let off without a harsh punishment?" Third imperial prince. Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wenhui both gasped out in shock. They had never thought that Ling Han would have such an amicable relationship with the third imperial prince. It was only now that Kong Wenhui managed to guess who Ziyan was, and could not help but shiver with fear. That was the third imperial prince, an imperial prince with real authority in his hands. In the future, it was possible that he would be inheriting the throne. Ziyan instantly stepped back and stood behind the third imperial prince, as if she was his shadow. "You've heard Ling Han's words, right? Just dance right here," the third imperial prince said calmly, yet his tone contained a severity that could not be refused. This was the aura of someone in the upper echelons of society. A pained expression appeared on Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wenhui's faces, yet they did not dare disobey. Filled with humiliation, they began to remove their clothing. "Brother Ling, please," the third imperial prince said with a smile. With his status, he would of course not stay here to watch 2 men dance naked. "Do you mind if I bring 2 friends along with me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Of course not," the third imperial prince answered with a laugh. Ling Han smiled at Li Hao and Zhu Xueqi and said, "If you two have nothing to do later on, would you like to join me?" "Can we really?" Li Hao and Zhu Xueyi's heartbeats instantly sped up. That was the one and only third imperial prince. If they could share a meal with him, then who in the whole imperial city would dare to bully them in the future? Ling Han must also have thought of this, and that was why he had invited them to join him. Instantly, a strong gratitude towards Ling Han arose within the two of them. "Of course you can," Ling Han said with a smile. "Many thanks, Big Brother Ling. Many thanks, third imperial prince." Li Hao and Zhu Xueqi both said in unison, and looked at Ling Han with heated gazes. This guy had just come to the imperial city for a few days, and he was already an honored guest of the third imperial prince. He was really too awesome. The 5 of them turned around and stepped into the cherishing flower pavilion. As for the pitiful Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wenhui, they continued their naked dancing on the street. Even though the third imperial prince and the others were no longer here, they dared not take the chance to run off. Otherwise, if the third imperial prince insisted on pursuing the matter, that would really become something very serious. 2 sturdy men taking off their clothes in public. As they removed each piece of clothing, they continued to dance. This was indeed a rare spectacle, which instantly attracted the attention of passers-by to gather around them and watch. How offensive! To actually dance naked here. Hee hee, most importantly, the dancers are two men. If it was two beautiful girls, then it would be a much more pleasing sight. Che, just look at their two little d*********. They aren't even half as big as mine. Forget it. If you expose your d****** in front of so many people, who knows, maybe it would even shrink so much that it'd be smaller than theirs. Is there anyone to take care of this issue? Two sturdy men dancing naked in a busy street like this, if this was seen by little kids, wouldn't it be very inappropriate? The spectators began to mock, causing Tan Wei-chi and Kong Wen-hui feel like they wanted to cry. Big brother Tan, what do we do now? Kong Wen-hui asked miserably. It was not only he who was being shamed now, but this matter would definitely implicate the clan behind him, and cause their Kong clan to become the butt of jokes. In the future, his status within the clan would definitely experience a drastic drop as a result of this incident. Shut up! Tan Wei-chi looked like he was ready to commit murder. If it was not because of Kong Wen-hui, how would he have fallen to this level? He hated Ling Han, yet he hated Kong Wen-hui even more. Seeing two sturdy men moving their d****** and twisting around into different poses, the spectators erupted into loud laughter. After entering into the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, Ling Han completely put Kong Wen-hui and Tan Wei-chi to the back of his mind. He was not so petty to keep holding a grudge against two such minor characters. Of course, if the two of them still had not given in after today, then what awaited them would be a thunderous crackdown. The third Imperial Prince had reserved a side courtyard, and many guests had already arrived by now. When they looked at Ling Han, curiosity arose on all their faces as they all began to guess at his background. He was someone that the third Imperial Prince not only sent out Miss Zi Yen to receive, but even the third Imperial Prince would personally step out to receive. Kume. Let me introduce to all of you. This is Ling Han, Brother Ling, a young friend of Fu Yuanshang, Grandmaster Fu, and also someone on very friendly terms with Wu Songlin, Grandmaster Wu. When he found out that Ling Han was actually a representative of Wu Songlin, he really got a big shock. Rain Country only had two black-grade high-level alchemists and they were both very close with Ling Han. Thus, the third Imperial Prince further dared not slight Ling Han. Hiss! The others all gasped in shock. A young friend, how could this term be so freely used? Chapter 144. Feng Yan has arrived. Ling Han could have become one of the trump cards in the third Imperial Prince's hand, but why was he so quickly playing this card? That was because it was now the most important period of the competition for the throne. The guests he had invited tonight were all the outstanding youths of various middle-class clans of the Imperial City. If they were to declare their loyalty towards him, that would be equivalent to getting the approval of their clans. Don't underestimate these clans. A few hundred middle-class clans united together could have quite a bit of influence. Most importantly, the 8 great clans were much too outstanding. Whichever Imperial Prince was crowned as Emperor, they were still the 8 great clans, neither advancing nor degrading. On the other hand, every Reign Emperor would still have to play well the role of mediator to maintain the peace between the 8 great clans. This was the responsibility of their reign. As a result, it was impossible to pull any of the 8 great clans into his camp. Thus, the third Imperial Prince could only place his focus on the middle-class clans. Why were there only 30-odd people tonight? That was because the other middle-class clans have already been divided between his camp, the eldest Imperial Prince, and the 7th Imperial Prince. The only ones left were these clans that had still not yet decided whom to support, and were waiting for the best offer. Lastly, whichever Imperial Prince ascended to the throne, the clans that had supported the wrong camp would definitely be pushed aside by the other clans. It wouldn't even be impossible for them to be forced out of the Imperial City in secret. When they heard that Ling Han actually had 2 black-grade high-level Grandmaster alchemists behind him, everyone could not help but reveal expressions of astonishment. That was too awesome, wasn't it? However, due to the outstanding status of alchemists, they usually would not interfere in any power struggle on their own initiative. Now, looking at the very friendly relationship between Ling Han and the third Imperial Prince, did that mean that the third Imperial Prince had gained the support of these 2 ultimate Grandmaster alchemists? Heavens, that would be desperately serious. With the support of these 2 awesome bosses behind him, even if the current Reign Emperor already had a candidate in mind for the position of his heir, He would probably have to reconsider his decision so as to avoid these two ultimate Grandmaster alchemists not cooperating and making things difficult for the imperial family when the new emperor was crowned. In the competition for the imperial throne, the third imperial prince had a slightly higher chance to emerge victorious in the first place. And now, all of a sudden, two great bosses emerged to support him. He was practically guaranteed to win. With such thoughts, these young people instantly became very passionate, and humbled themselves to the lowest extent. At first, although they were in the position of subjects, there was still an air of pride in their bones because he was the one who wanted to pull them into his camp. But things were different now. Now that they knew the third imperial prince's trump card, these people took the initiative to become closer with him. They were both black-grade high-level alchemists. If the two of them simply threw out any kind of alchemical medicine, it would be enough for them to go crazy over. When the third imperial prince saw this scene, a smile turned up the corners of his lips. This was exactly what he wanted to see. He could not wait to play this card, because the current reign emperor had the intention to abdicate from his throne to put all his focus on his studies of martial arts. At most within 5 years' time, the emperor wanted to have his heir inherit the throne, so the third imperial prince had to make the most of his time. Ha 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 ha, let us all drink. The third imperial prince raised his wine cup and instantly, everyone else raised theirs as well. When the third imperial prince drained his cup, the others would naturally not dare to leave wine in their own cups, and drained theirs as well. After the third imperial prince sat, they all returned to their seats. The third imperial prince was now fully content with his achievements. This place was only the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but in the near future, in the imperial court, there would be even more high-ranking persons paying him respect and subjecting to his rule. The female attendants began to replenish the wine in everyone's cups. Why was the Cherishing Flower Pavilion so expensive? That was because these female attendants were not only astonishingly beautiful, but had very elegant bearing. Some of them were even in element-gathering tier, and for men to have these female attendants to accompany them in drinking fulfilled men's natural inherent desire to conquer. Ling Han was the brightest star tonight. He had a beauty at either side accompanying him to drink, and both were in element-gathering tier. One had to know that both these beauties were young women in their 20s, yet they had already stepped into element-gathering tier. They were outstandingly talented in the first place, but at the same time, they also needed a large amount of resources to be able to reach this level. These two women have both undergone strict training, and they spoke very gently and moved very lightly and elegantly. What was even more remarkable was that they were very good at observing the facial expressions and movements of others. Ling Han needed only to cast a look, and they would know which dish Ling Han wanted to sample, and immediately, they would take the initiative to deliver a bite-sized portion of the said dish into Ling Han's mouth. Such a rapturous array was definitely enough to cause any young man to lose all composure, and easily fall into such a gentle trap. However, what kind of mental strength did Ling Han have? As the saying goes, he could pass into a field of flowers, yet not one leaf would cling to his figure. His heart would not be disturbed by any woman, no matter how beautiful she was. He did not maintain any reservations either, and only peacefully enjoyed the service of these two women. Yet his eyes remained clear, and there was no sign of asterisk on his face, causing the third imperial prince, who had kept one eye on him, to look even higher upon him. The third imperial prince even had the delusion that the person he was looking at was not a youth in his teens, but an ultimate warrior who had experienced multiple hardships and witnessed countless great spectacles. Ling Han had the support of the two great bosses of alchemy behind him, so naturally he became someone who everyone wanted to gain the favor of. However, Ling Han seemed to have no intention to pay too much attention to these people. He would only occasionally speak with the third imperial prince, Li Hao, and Xueqi. The rest of the time, he would simply concentrate on enjoying his meal. This was very normal. In his last life, he was the one and only alchemy emperor, so how could he have the patience and mood to deal with these little brats who thought that they were so extraordinary? None of the others thought that there was anything strange about the proud way that Ling Han was acting, because alchemists were indeed such proud people in the first place. If Ling Han did not show such prideful behavior, they would think that it was odd instead. When they saw that Ling Han was not so easily approachable, they naturally turned their attention to Li Hao and Xueqi. They all earnestly sought the company of these two, causing Li Hao and Xueqi to feel overwhelmed. Just now, a mere young master from a minor clan would dare to insult and humiliate them. Yet now, there were so many young masters from middle-class clans all fighting to befriend them. The two of them could not help but look at Ling Han with gratitude. All of this was because of Ling Han. The third imperial prince saw that Ling Han only ate and drank, and was not like the others who took the opportunity to paw at the female attendants beside them, and asked, "Brother Ling, are you not satisfied with these two beauties?" When they heard these words, these two beauties instantly revealed resentful expressions, their lovely appearances very moving. Even if one knew very well that they were only playing along, one could not help but feel tender towards them. Haha, if Brother Ling thinks they are not tender enough, then why not have Ziyan accompany you? The third imperial prince asked suddenly. Ziyan's face instantly changed, and her body shook slightly. Her eyes were filled with resentment. She was not putting on a show, but really feeling heartbroken. She had thought that she had a high place in the third imperial prince's heart, but never thought that she was still only a card that he could play. Li Hao and Zhu Xueyi's hearts both sped up at this. Previously, Ziyan had been so grand and impressive in front of them, yet now, she would still have to accompany Ling Han to drink. This gap was really too big for them to accept. Ling Han smiled and asked, "Are you willing, Miss Ziyan?" Ziyan's figure shook again, but she answered, "Ziyan is willing." Yet Ling Han shook his head, and said, "A gentleman will not take someone else's favorite. Miss Ziyan belongs to the third imperial prince, so it's best if you stay by the third imperial prince's side." Ziyan instantly looked grateful at this. She would naturally not dare to disobey the third imperial prince's command, but if she was able to escape from this calamity, her impression of Ling Han improved greatly. However, she also gained a new understanding of the third imperial prince. In view of the throne, anyone would only be the pawns that he could use, and if she continued to follow at his heels so blindly, what kind of ending awaited her? She was obviously at a loss. "Ha ha ha ha, third imperial prince, I have come late. May I enter?" It was at this moment that a clear voice was heard from outside, and this voice had a very strong air to it. The third imperial prince's expression changed slightly, and exclaimed, "Feng Yan!" Chapter 145. Tyrant. Ling Han has heard of the name Feng Yan many times. When he was at Seven Winds Mountains and encountered Feng Luo, that was the first time he had heard of Feng Yan, and the latter was very much revered by Li Hao and the others. After that, during the Dai Yuan tournament, the name Feng Yan was frequently mentioned as well. That was the name of a genius who could make geniuses like Qi Yongyi, Li Dongyu, and the others pale in comparison. After he had arrived at Huyang Academy, he found out that this person's ability qualified him to rank within the top 10 strongest true disciples, and may even be qualified to challenge the only 3 core disciples of the academy. Because of Feng Luo, there was no way he would be able to avoid coming into conflict with Feng Yan. And tonight they had finally met. "Haha, no matter what time Brother Feng is here, I will definitely come to receive you," the third imperial prince said in a loud voice, laughing. "Xiao!" A figure suddenly shot into the side courtyard. The figure was a tall, slender young man with clearly shaped eyebrows and bright eyes. He had a head of thick, black locks, and it seemed as if there was a holy light enveloping his entire body, emanating a very pale light that would cause anyone who saw him to be enchanted by him. Ling Han's eyes suddenly narrowed. 7th layer of gushing spring tear. Before the new year, wasn't this man only in the 3rd layer of gushing spring tear? How could it be that he had suddenly broken through 4 whole layers in a mere 2 months' time? This was even more awesome than Ling Han himself. This guy must have gotten some kind of colossal fateful encounter. Otherwise, who would be able to surpass Ling Han with the perfect combination of his alchemical pills to support his cultivation, his heaven-grade spirit base, and heaven-grade cultivation techniques in terms of cultivation speed? Feng Yan, a man that was widely known among the young generation of Rain Country, and someone that no one dared to underestimate. This man had a high chance to enter into spiritual pedestal tier one day, and become one of the ultimate warriors of Rain Country. "Brother Feng!" The third imperial prince stood up and raised his clasped hands in Feng Yan's direction. Though he had a higher cultivation level than Ling Han, he did not have the divine sense that Ling Han had retained from his last life as an ultimate warrior of heaven tier. Additionally, he was quite far away from Feng Yan, and so could not identify the latter's cultivation level. Moreover, who would observe another's cultivation level for no reason? "Your Imperial Highness." Feng Yan too raised his clasped hands, and swept his eyes over all those present, then said, "I have come so boldly here tonight because firstly, I wish to greet your Imperial Highness, and secondly, I heard that the person who framed my younger brother and almost caused him to be expelled from the academy is also present here tonight. As he spoke his last words, his gaze stopped and focused on Ling Han. Obviously, he had recognized Ling Han. The third Imperial Prince was stunned at first, before a raging fire was lit inside his heart. Feng Yan was obviously here to seek vengeance. But the problem now was that this was a banquet that he was hosting, and Feng Yan actually came to make trouble. How much face was Feng Yan not giving him? Indeed, he looked very highly upon Feng Yan, but the latter was still a mere martial artist at the end of the day. Honestly speaking, Feng Yan's cultivation level was lower than his own, and what he looked highly upon was Feng Yan's future potential to become stronger. In terms of background, the Feng clan only had martial artists of Gushing Spring tier, and in terms of personal ability, Feng Yan was only in the third layer of Gushing Spring tier. What right did Feng Yan have not to give him any face at all? In the heart of the third Imperial Prince, Ling Han, who had two major bosses of alchemy behind him, was obviously far more important than Feng Yan, so he decided to fully support Ling Han without any hesitation. He said, "Brother Feng, I was also present during that incident, and I can definitely guarantee that it was your brother who intended to frame Ling Han." Yet Ling Han frowned, because he heard Feng Yan's words almost caused him to be expelled from the academy. So, that meant that Feng Luo was still currently at the academy. What was going on? He wanted to deal with an old pervert, yet encountered trouble. Now he wanted to kick Feng Luo out of the academy, and here comes Feng Yan, who used some kind of unknown means to pull Feng Luo back in. The academy has already investigated that it was the sole responsibility of Wei He-lu. It was he who had stolen the badge that I lent to Feng Luo. Wei He-lu has had a previous conflict with Ling Han, and so framed my brother, Feng Yan said darkly. Fuck, how could he be so shameless? Everything was obviously planned by Feng Luo, yet why had he suddenly become the victim according to his brother? Right or wrong were so easily overturned by Feng Yan. Yet Ling Han was not the slightest bit angered. History was always written by the victors, and in this world, the real authority and valid argument was decided by the strength of one's fists. What he did not understand was how could Feng Yan be so fearless when he was only in the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier. One had to know that even if Feng Yan stepped into Spiritual Ocean tier, he was still a subject of Rain Country, and had not yet reached the level where he could break away from imperial authority. This would at least require Spiritual Pedestal tier. And if one was in Flower Blossoming tier, that was an existence that would stand out over all others. Feng Yan should definitely not be as idiotic as this. The third Imperial Prince too never thought that Feng Yan would actually dare oppose him like this. The thoughts in his head whirred quickly. Could it be that Feng Yan had sought refuge from his eldest brother or his 7th brother, and that was why he did not fear him at all? But no matter how it was, a mere subject actually dared to talk back to him publicly. This was a challenge to his authority, and something he would not tolerate. Feng Yan, take care of your words. He withdrew his smile, and his face became completely serious as a faint powerful air emanated from him. When a son of God raged, blood would flow over 10,000 miles. Though the third Imperial Prince was not the Emperor yet, he still had limited use of power of the nation which could instantly place him in a very powerful position, as if he was an emperor, causing everyone to feel only respect and fear towards him. Your Imperial Highness, hand over this person to me, and I'll give you face and not kill him. Feng Yan did not show any signs of fear, and even began to announce his conditions to the third Imperial Prince. Silence fell over the whole area. Had Feng Yan lost his mind? That was the third Imperial Prince, the most powerful person in Huyang Academy. His personal ability was more than enough to dominate over Feng Yan. What more that he was an Imperial Prince with monstrous power in his grasp. Even if the third Imperial Prince was an expert in concealing his thoughts, hearing such words caused his face to twitch slightly, hinting at the powerful rage he was feeling. He took a deep breath and suppressed these emotions before saying calmly, "You are going a bit too far. Is your Imperial Highness not planning to surrender this person to me?" Feng Yan smiled a bit mockingly. "Could it be you dare to use force right in front of me?" the third Imperial Prince asked coldly. He was now truly furious. Everyone has the responsibility to arrest a criminal. Is your Imperial Highness intending to shield such a criminal? Feng Yan strode forwards, really showing absolutely no fear of the third Imperial Prince. How dare you? Ziyan leaped out and waved her hands. In each hand appeared a blue dagger, and she charged towards Feng Yan. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Blue light danced unhindered, forming a dance of daggers that filled the air, as if there was a screen of light in front of their eyes. Small tricks. Feng Yan humphed, and punched out with a fist. This punch from him was terrifyingly strong, as if a mountain was pressing down. He had just punched out, and Ziyan's face turned completely pale, her crimson hair dancing in all directions as if a hurricane had just passed by.
Pang!
This punch had not yet hit her, but Ziyan was already flung away by a powerful force. As she flew through the air, an arrow of blood followed her. This. Everyone was absolutely astonished at this. Feng Yan really dared to cause injury to someone. Had he gone crazy, or did he have some kind of incredible trump card hidden up his sleeve? Trash! The third imperial prince humphed lowly. He was already very furious, and now one of his people was defeated with a single punch, causing him to lose control of his emotions, and unable to help but spit out this word. Ziyan looked like she had suffered a harsh blow. Her figure gave a slight shudder, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Yet Feng Yan only stared at Ling Han and exclaimed darkly, "You are indeed very bold." Chapter 146. Lady Yan. "I have always been very bold," Ling Han said in a very calm tone. "You aren't scared that I will kill you?" Feng Yan asked, as if there was only the two of them there. He did not even care about the presence of the third imperial prince. The third imperial prince's entire body was shaking all over. He could barely hold himself back anymore. "Do you dare?" Ling Han smiled. Feng Yan actually considered this question seriously for a moment, then answered, "Temporarily not." Temporarily not. So that meant that he would dare to in the future. Hiss, could it be that this guy didn't know Ling Han had the two big bosses of alchemy standing behind him, and was someone that even the Rain Emperor had to give some amount of face to? "If you don't dare to, then get lost. What are you lingering around here for? Planning to show off your pretty face?" Ling Han rebuked. "Ha ha ha ha." The third imperial prince laughed loudly, feeling very gratified. Yet Feng Yan was not angered in the slightest and said, "You've beaten up that worthless brother of mine a few times, and I have come tonight to repay the favor, but it'll be enough if I thrash you once. In the future, I will thoroughly discredit you, and you will become spurned by all before I finally kill you." The tone he used was one of complete calmness, as if he had secured some incredible power and authority that allowed him to kill anyone he desired to in this imperial city. "Feng Yan, are you finished?" The third imperial prince stood up and strode towards Feng Yan, flames of rage burning within his eyes. "You are indeed very brave to actually dare to proclaim repeatedly your intention to murder in this imperial city. I shall apprehend you and deliver you to the prison to reflect on yourself." "Oh, is your Imperial Highness going to personally give me some guidance?" Feng Yan smiled calmly and said, "I have long admired the Son of Heaven fist technique that your Imperial Highness uses, and I'd really enjoy experiencing it tonight." This guy must have lost his mind, everyone else thought, but they could not help but admire Feng Yan's bravery. How many people in the Imperial City would actually dare to so openly oppose the third Imperial Prince? Even the young elites and geniuses of the 8 great clans would not have such ability nor the courage to do such a thing. "You will soon get your wish." The third Imperial Prince's fists trembled, and instantly, flashes of chi circulated all over his body. That was the power of the nation. All descendants of the Imperial line, even if they were from a branch line like Qi Yongyi, were able to use this ability. The difference between power of the nation and power of the city only lay in the strength of the ability. They were basically the same thing. Using power of the nation to support oneself, and to gain the ability to suppress one's opponent. It was enough to increase one's battle prowess by another 2 or even 3 battle stars. The third Imperial Prince was in the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier in the first place. Once he began to manipulate power of the nation, his battle prowess would at least be worth 10 stars, and that was yet to take into consideration the additional power upgrade from his martial arts technique and fist chi. Taking all these into consideration, there would definitely be no issue for the third Imperial Prince to reach 11 stars. Facing a third Imperial Prince who was making a full-out effort, Feng Yan did not dare to be careless, and eventually withdrew his laid-back expression, becoming serious. The two of them made a move to attack, and the air instantly became extremely tense. "Hee hee, Is it appropriate to start fighting in my cherishing flower pavilion? A dainty voice was heard, and a shapely figure shot over. It was a beautiful woman with a very sensuous figure, and her face was temptingly gorgeous and coy. Her mature body was practically enough to turn the eyes of all onlookers red. How sexy! How impressive! It was enough to incite others to commit crime. Lady Yen! The third imperial prince raised his clasped hands in her direction and smiled. This was the owner of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. To be able to open such a money-squandering establishment in the imperial city, how could the owner be just any common, ordinary person? Even Feng Yen withdrew his battle intent, raised his clasped hands and said, "Greetings, Lady Yen." Lady Yen smiled brightly and said, "I cannot bear to receive such great courtesy from esteemed guests such as you too. However, the Cherishing Flower Pavilion has its own rules, and it is forbidden to fight here. If the two of you want to fight, please proceed outside for your battle." Haha, since Lady Yen has already thus spoken, how could I be rude? Feng Yen once again raised his clasped hands, turned to Ling Han and said, "I will let go of you this once, but there will be no second time." He turned around and left, not giving any face to the third imperial prince at all. Ling Han and the third imperial prince were both clear. This was all due to Feng Luo. Because of him, Feng Yen had begun to nurse a grudge towards the two of them. More importantly, what kind of trump card had this guy obtained that he would even dare to oppose the third imperial prince in public? After the trouble caused by Feng Yen, all the guests had lost the heart to continue drinking and having fun, so the third imperial prince simply ended the banquet, and everyone returned to their respective homes. "Mr. Ling, could you meet with me for a moment?" Ling Han had just stepped out of the courtyard when he heard Lady Yan's voice. It was dainty and sweet as if it was made out of honey, a very beautiful voice. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Of course." He told Li Hao and Xueqi to go first, while he walked towards Lady Yen. "Mr. Ling, please." Lady Yen invited Ling Han into an elegant little courtyard, where flowers bloomed all around, creating a very beautiful environment. "May I know your reason for meeting with me, Lady Yen?" Ling Han sat down, and an extremely beautiful young girl served some fragrant tea. This young girl tea was of much higher quality than the two women before, and every move and smile from her seemed to have some kind of spell that would cause the hearts of those who saw her to throb and beat faster. She was also a very brave girl. She took her place, standing behind Lady Yen, and directed a curious gaze at Ling Han. That was because there were very few people in the imperial city who could enter this side courtyard, and any one of these people could cause the whole imperial city to tremble with a few stomps of their feet. A young man that looked to be even younger than herself. What basis did he have to come here? Moreover, his expression looked completely calm. There was no sign of nervousness or pleasant surprise, causing her to be even more baffled. "Mr. Ling has obtained the favor of two ultimate grandmaster alchemists, which is a very curious thing for me," Lady Yen said with a beautiful smile. "Perhaps I will have something that may need Mr. Ling's help in the future, and so would like to establish good relations with Mr. Ling." Well, she was direct. "This is a little gift from me, and it would please me if Mr. Ling would agree to accept it." Lady Yen nodded at the young girl, and the latter withdrew a small wooden box, which she then placed on the table. Ling Han did not refuse, and simply opened the box on the spot. Inside the box lay a red-colored brocade pad, and on the brocade pad was a handguard. From the looks of it, it should be quite old. A simple, primitive air emanated from it. He stroked the handguard a few times, and closed his eyes slightly. After a moment he finally said, "Lady Yen is indeed very generous. Such a gift. I do not feel deserving of it."
Oh?
Lady Yen looked curious at this and asked, "Does Mr. Ling know the use of this handguard?" "If I have not guessed wrongly, this will help one increase one's battle prowess, and it should be able to at least increase it by a whole battle star," Ling Han said. The increase of a whole battle star was a very terrifying thing. For most people, they were only able to use battle prowess that corresponded to their cultivation level, but once the battle prowess they could display exceeded their cultivation level, that would mean that they had gained the ability to challenge an opponent stronger than themselves, regardless of individual cultivation levels. That was why Ling Han had said Lady Yen was very generous. This was their first time meeting, and yet she had given him such a valuable gift. Even if Lady Yen was a very generous person by nature, this was still too much of a shock. "Mr. Ling is indeed knowledgeable." "That's right. The name of this tool is Purple Star Handguard. Once activated, it would be able to increase the user's battle prowess by another star, but exactly to what extent this power upgrade would depend on the level of affinity the user has with this handguard, Lady Yen explained. Ling Han put back the lid on the box and asked, "Milady, is there something you want my help with?"
There is indeed.
Lady Yen smiled faintly. Chapter 147. Cutting a carriage in the middle of the street. Please speak, milady. If it is within my ability, then I would of course not refuse. If it is not, then I would not dare accept such a priceless gift, Ling Han said very calmly. The young girl looked extremely astonished at this. After hearing the effects of this handguard, he could still remain so calm. Was this guy really a young man? Why did he seem like an old man who had suffered uncountable hardships? Lady Yen smiled and said, "Since it is something that I want to request your help with, then it is of course within your ability, Mr. Ling. The task that I would like to seek your help with is for you to request the very able person behind Mr. Ling to concoct a permanent pill for me." Permanent pill? An expression of shock appeared on Ling Han's face. Milady has a friend that has entered into a state of false death?
How did you know?
Lady Yen stood suddenly, looking very agitated. Permanent pill was a black-grade high-level alchemical pill, but it was very near the level of earth-grade. The number of black-grade high-level alchemists that could successfully concoct it could be counted on the fingers of one hand. In the past, Lady Yen had also asked Fu Yuanshang and Wu Songlin to help her concoct it, but the two of them did not have the slightest bit of certainty that they could succeed, and so refused her. And now, Ling Han was able to guess the reason for her need of the permanent pill just from hearing its name. How could she not believe that there was a Grandmaster alchemist behind him that was even more awesome than Fu Yuanshang and Wu Songlin? Earth-grade alchemist. Anything that happened in Cherishing Flower Pavilion would never escape her eyes or ears. Thus, when she found out that Ling Han had a profoundly deep friendship with the two big bosses of alchemy, she had already guessed that there was an even more capable alchemist standing behind Ling Han. Otherwise, Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanshang would never have lowered themselves to befriend someone so much younger than themselves. This caused her to be even more resolved to establish a good relationship with Ling Han, and see if she would be able to obtain the help of that Grandmaster alchemist behind Ling Han to concoct permanent pill for her. "I guessed," Ling Han answered serenely. He would naturally not be telling her that he had been the alchemy emperor in his last life, and there was no pill formulae that he had not heard of or seen before. The more serene he appeared to be, the higher his position became in Lady Yan's heart. This was what confidence meant. "Mr. Ling, does the alchemist behind you have the certainty to successfully concoct the permanent pill?" Lady Yen asked in a slightly shaking voice. "Yes," Ling Han nodded and smiled. In truth, if it had been a few days ago, he would really not have the certainty to be successful, because this was near the level of earth-grade alchemical pills, and he could only manage to successfully concoct yellow-grade high-level alchemical pills at maximum. However, after he had fused with the strange fire, he had enough confidence that he would be able to concoct all alchemical pills from earth-grade and below. Who asked him to be the alchemy emperor in his last life? Really? Happiness came too suddenly, causing Lady Yen to feel that everything was surreal. Ling Han nodded. Thank you, Mr. Ling." Lady Yen bowed slightly, her beautiful eyes brimming with the light of tears. Ling Han said, "Hand over the ingredients necessary to me, then come to the Hu Yang Academy to collect the pill 3 days later." 3 days. A dilemma that had troubled her for 10 years could be solved within a mere 3 days' time? Lady Yan's expression looked both pleasantly surprised and somewhat blank. She was stunned for a while before she said, Shuang, go collect the ingredients for me." "Yes, milady," the young girl beside her answered quickly. Her name was Yun Shuang, and she was an orphan who had been taken in by Lady Yen. Since little, Lady Yen had loved and doted upon her as if she was her real daughter. Very soon, Yun Shuang returned with another wooden box. This one was much bigger than the previous one. "Then I shall take my leave first," Ling Han said, picking up the wooden box. "Please allow my personal carriage to send you back." Lady Yen pointed at the wooden box in Ling Han's hands. It would be inconvenient for him to walk back when he had such a large box in his hands. Ling Han actually had the spatial ring on him, but would naturally not use it in front of Lady Yen, so he nodded and said, "Then I shall have to trouble you, Lady Yen." "You're welcome, Mr. Ling." Lady Yen had solved a huge problem and could not help feeling very happy, showing a bright dazzling smile. "Shuang Shuang, escort Mr. Ling back for me."
"Yes, milady."
Yun Shuang Shuang agreed respectfully. In the company of Yun Shuang Shuang, Ling Han stepped out of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. There was already a horse-drawn carriage at the entrance, and the horse drawing the carriage was a handsome, completely white horse. However, there was a deer's horn growing from the forehead of the horse. That was the Cloud Deer Horse, a type of demonic beast. It was not very powerful, but because it was very good-looking, it was usually used to draw carriages or as a mount. It went for a very high price. It was even more luxurious inside the carriage. There was even a soft couch on which one could lay down to rest, as well as fresh fruits and fine wine that allowed a traveler to enjoy rare luxuries even when on a journey.
"Please, young Master Han,"
Yun Shuang Shuang said. She was extremely curious about Ling Han. A young man like him could actually resolve the problem that had troubled her mistress for so many years. Ling Han boarded the carriage, took out the handguard, and began to refine it. Yun Shuang Shuang, who was sitting at one side, felt extremely depressed. She was a very beautiful young girl, and what man would not have his eyes stuck on her upon seeing her? Yet this brat completely ignored her presence, simply focusing all of his attention on that handguard. Yes, she admitted, that handguard was very valuable, but it already belonged to him. He could look at it any time, but was she someone that he could see at any time that he liked? What a foolish brat. Ling Han did not know that he had become an unromantic youth in this young girl's heart. He continued to observe this handguard, and his palm rubbed against the patterns branded on the surface of the handguard, his face pensive. Spiritual tools were typically used to increase the user's battle prowess, but it was typically done through the spiritual tool's own power to achieve this means. For example, if there was the power of ice sealed into a spiritual tool, then once released, it would create 1,000 miles of ice, and snow would fly over 10,000 miles, which was a very powerful ability. This was not directly increasing the martial artist's own battle prowess. But this handguard was actually able to increase its user's battle prowess by a single battle star, which attracted Ling Han's interest. He wanted to investigate clearly the amazing properties of this spiritual tool. If it could be used directly within his body, then wouldn't it be even more amazing? He sat with utter seriousness, as if he was an immortal monk. Even if there was an extremely beautiful young girl seated beside him, it was as if he had not seen her at all. Yun Shuang Shuang could not stop her face from twitching at being ignored, looking very much unable to accept this. This was really too despicable. She was an extreme beauty, hey? Pang! All of a sudden, the carriage actually split open from the middle. That was a flash of light from a saber, seemingly powerful enough to slice the heavens and destroy the land, that cut the carriage in half. What person would be so bold as to make a move in the imperial city? Ling Han and Yun Shuang Shuang both leapt out of the overturning carriage before landing steadily on the ground. The coachman did not suffer much injury. He drove the horse and drew the other half of the carriage some distance away before finally stopping. Ling Han and Yun Shuang Shuang both raised their heads, and not too far away, on a wall, there was a young man standing with a saber in his hand, a powerful dominating pressure emanating from him. Feng Yan. Ling Han, I've said before that I will be giving you a thrashing tonight, he smiled. His expression remained cold, and the pressure exuded from him was very terrifying. This was a person that liked to break the rules. Or so Ling Han thought. He had also been such a person in his last life, someone who would not be shackled by any kind of rules or regulations. That was because he had enough power to disregard them as one of the 7 ultimate warriors of heaven tier in the world. Was his status not awesome enough? Feng Yan was not an idiot. He dared to openly oppose the 3rd Imperial Prince just now, and now cut a carriage in half in public. This was not merely arrogance. He must naturally have some basis for his overwhelming confidence. Feng Yan, you have gone too far. Are you not going to give face even to Milady? Yun Shuang Shuang asked furiously. Was this a public challenge issued to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion? Chapter 148. A Magnificent Pervert. I have already given face to Lady Yen before. Feng Yan smiled softly, That was why I did not make a move at Cherishing Flower Pavilion, and deliberately waited here instead. He had power, talent, and patience. He was indeed a difficult opponent. That's how Ling Han thought of him. In truth, he even admired Feng Yan's character quite a bit. Unfortunately, before the two of them had even met, they had already stood on opposing sides, and were already destined to be foes. In his last life, even if there were a few 100 million Feng Yans added together, they would not be a match for even just a look from him, but now. Ling Han's face grew serious. The seventh layer of gushing spring tear possessed even the ability to kill him instantly.
Don't worry, I won't kill you temporarily, that is.
Feng Yan smiled, but this smile was filled with pressure and domineering.
Feng Yan.
Yun Shuang called out loudly. That was really enough. One after another, they all did not care about the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, and did not even pay any attention to an outstanding beauty like herself. She was practically about to become extraordinarily furious.
Feng Yan did not even spare her a glance, and simply slashed his saber through the air.
Shwa! A flash of saber chi danced quickly towards them, as if it was a raging dragon. When cultivation levels were different, the power behind the saber chi would of course be different. Ling Han was aware that the 6 flashes of sword chi he had now could not match even 1/10 of the power behind the single flash of saber chi. However, there was no such thing as giving up without even battling in his mind. Ling Han gave a loud shout, drew his sword and parried. 6 flashes of sword chi shot forwards unhindered.
Pang!
Without any surprise, he was flung away by this blow from the saber. The box in his left hand instantly flew out of his grasp, but his right hand still firmly held onto his sword. As a swordsman, he would keep his hold on his sword as long as he was still alive. Cough! He spat out a mouthful of blood. When he looked down, he could see there was a deep wound on his chest, from which blood was gushing out steadily. However, indestructible heaven scroll was already circulating, and this wound was slowly shrinking in size.
N?
A hint of seriousness flickered through Feng Yan's eyes. 6 flashes of sword chi? You are more powerful than I expected. Additionally, your physical body seems to be much stronger than any normal martial artist of element gathering tier. I had intended to wound you severely with this slash. Even so, his tone remained completely calm, as if everything was under his control. Ling Han wiped off the blood at the corner of his lips, stood proudly, flicked his sword and said, I admit that you are currently more powerful than I am. I would need about half a year to be able to surpass you and firmly trample upon you.
Ha 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 ha.
Feng Yan was stunned for a moment, before suddenly laughing loudly. He nodded and said, You are indeed extraordinarily talented to be able to form 6 flashes of sword chi, and are indeed much more powerful than I was in the past. However, you will not have the chance to live for another half year. Within 3 months at most, even if you were in the Imperial Palace of Rain Country, I would be able to seize you and you will die by my saber. Yun Shuang, who had been standing at one side, was completely dumbstruck and could not say anything at all. In her mind, these two people were both maniacs. Feng Yan was so strong, yet Ling Han actually said that he would be able to catch up to him in a half year's time and even trample on Feng Yan. And Feng Yan was even more of a maniac to say that even if Ling Yan hid in the Imperial Palace, he would be able to seize him and kill him. What treasonous words was he saying? Oh, then bring it on, and let me experience the power of the so-called strongest genius of Rain Country. Ling Han's battle intent had shot skywards. He had his own trump cards in hand. Even if it was merely the strange fire, if Feng Yan was caught by the strange fire through close contact, even spiritual ocean tier elites would die. What more a mere gushing spring tier martial artist like Feng Yan? You do not have to try to anger me. Since I have said that I will be giving you a thrashing tonight, then it would be useless even if you kneel down and beg for mercy. Feng Yan said calmly. Another slash from his saber shot out, and a terrifyingly powerful flash of saber chi danced forwards. Pang! Ling Han was once again flung away, but he was much better prepared this time. His sword managed to block an uncountable number of power ripples, and actually dispersed about over half of the power behind this one slash. Though he was still flung away and spat blood, the injuries he had suffered this time were much lighter when compared to the previous time. Feng Yan could not help but look astonished at this, and said, I only attacked once, and you were able to capture the moves of my saber, and use a very wonderful way to defend yourself. You indeed deserve the name of genius. Now, I am beginning to waver. A genius like you that could become a threat to me. Should I take the chance to eliminate you as soon as possible?
When he said the last words, he did not hide the killing intent brimming in his heart at all.
Ling Han's left hand moved slightly. Strange fire could be flung out at any time. This was currently his greatest killing move. Feng Yan leaped down from the wall and strode towards Ling Han.
Every step he took felt like it caused the ground to have a slight tremor. Yun Xueqi was shocked, then realized that it was not the ground that was trembling, but it was her heart that was actually influenced by Feng Yan's movements without her knowledge. This guy was really powerful. However, she still stepped out courageously and stood in front of Feng Yan, for Ling Han was the key to the concoction of permanent pill. This was the most important thing to Lady Yan, and even if she lost her life in the process, she wanted to make sure Ling Han was safe.
Move away! Ling Han shouted.
He had not fallen to the level that he needed a woman to die in his stead. I will not wound you for the sake of Lady Yan.
Feng Yan's left hand flashed out and a powerful force shot out. Yun Xueqi was instantly pushed to one side, her face pale, and she couldn't manage to get her breath back, which caused her great suffering. A martial artist of the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier against an opponent in the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier. This was the only possible outcome. Feng Yan continued to walk towards Ling Han, his expression cool. There was no way to tell what he was thinking or intending to do. Was he going to simply injure Ling Han, or kill him?
Ling Han waited with utter seriousness. This was an opponent that was so strong that it was enough to cause one to lose all hope.
This little sister is really very pretty. Can you let me take a look at your breasts? It was at this moment that a voice was suddenly heard, and a figure appeared. This newcomer was currently looking at Yun Xueqi with lecherous eyes, and his fingers were wriggling like noodles, as if he was about to grab onto her at any moment. Yun Xueqi experienced a scare, and quickly shielded her breasts with her arms, rapidly taking a step backwards. If I can't look at your breasts, then I would be fine with your bottom too. This person settled for the next best thing, as if he was a person that was very easy to deal with.
This was a young man that looked to be only in his 20s.
He was not a hideous man, but could not be considered handsome either. He simply looked like the most common of men that could be found on the streets. A perverted smile was all over his face, and he was practically salivating at Yun Xueqi's *******. Yun Xueqi was so scared that she took another step back. Good little sister, don't be scared. I'm just a pervert, not a bad person. This person said with a very guiltless expression. A pervert could act so confident as if he was in the right. Feng Yan's eyes narrowed.
With his ability, he actually did not manage to see how this person had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and now he could not even tell how powerful this person was.
A strong feeling of dread uncontrollably rose up within him. How do I address you? He asked.
Don't speak to me, you ugly man, the person spat out, his eyes still completely focused on Yun Xueqi. Little sister, what color are your underpants?
Yun Xueqi turned completely pale, and Feng Yan's expression did not look too nice either.
He said in a deep voice, Are you intending to defend this brat?
Just blabbering on and on, don't you know that's very annoying? The person turned around to sweep a look over Feng Yan. If you keep chattering, I will thrash you to the point you become even uglier. He turned around to look back at Yun Xueqi and said, Little sister, my name is Gu Fenghua, a magnificent pervert, a 100% pervert. He said proudly, as if being able to become a pervert was a very honorable achievement. Chapter 149. Retreat. Feng Yan's expression changed greatly, and he could not stop himself from making a move as he declared, Then let me experience your ability. He slashed out with his saber, and shot an attack at the pervert who had called himself Gu Fenghua. Pang! Gu Fenghua parried this slash with his bare fists, using some kind of unknown martial arts technique that turned both his fists completely black at the moment of his attack, as if they were made out of metal. Clashing with the saber caused a series of fiery sparks from the friction. After this exchange, both of them took a few steps back, and a serious expression appeared on their faces at the same time. You should be in the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier, right? Feng Yan asked with a lofty expression. Otherwise, you would not be able to block this slash of mine. Gu Fenghua looked very astonished, and said, Ugly man,
You are obviously not a pervert, but why do you have such power? Apparently in his eyes, all powerful elites had to be perverts. Feng Yan humphed and said, "Stop trying to scam me. Tonight, I'll give you some face, and temporarily let this brat off the hook." Ugly man, what kind of unfathomable nonsense are you blabbering on about? How could a handsome pervert like myself know such an ugly brat? Gu Fenghua's face was filled with disdain, and he turned and said to Yun Shuang, "Girl, look at how extraordinarily big your breasts are, and the clothes you are wearing are obviously a bit too small. Why don't you let this big brother take your measurements and make you a new suit of clothing?" He stretched out a hand, and looked to be about to grab her breast, scaring Yun Shuang so much that she took another few steps back. Feng Yan looked deeply at Gu Fenghua. There was actually such a young and powerful elite in Rain Country, but why had he never heard of this man? He was a decisive person by character, and immediately turned and left. "Pervert, thanks," Ling Han grinned at Gu Fenghua. Yun Shuang's face turned pale. It was one thing if he proclaimed himself a pervert, but it was a completely different matter if another person called him a pervert. Who knows if this would incite the anger of this pervert? "You have good taste." Gu Fenghua gave him a thumbs up, actually able to tell that I am a pervert. "I am definitely going to befriend you." "Pooh." Yun Shuang coughed repeatedly. "Who would not be able to tell that you are a pervert? Was that something you should be proud of and boast about? Indeed, the heart and thoughts of a pervert could not be understood with conventional reasoning." "You are not a citizen of Rain Country, right?" Ling Han looked at him, thought for a moment, and asked, "Was that Black Iron Hand you were using just now?" How do you know of Black Iron Hand?" Gu Fenghua looked extremely surprised at this. This was a secret technique of his school, and it was actually recognized by a youth of Rain Country. This was practically inconceivable. He widened his eyes, stared at Ling Han and asked, "Could it be that you are also a pervert?" The corners of Ling Han's lips twitched. One indeed had to prepare to become a pervert in order to converse with a pervert. He laughed loudly, and said, "The identifying characteristics of Black Iron Hand are too distinctive. When it is used, the user's fists would look like black iron, and with the advancing of cultivation level, the level of hardness would continue to increase. It is definitely not weaker than any spiritual tools of the same level." Gu Fenghua's expression changed a few times, before settling on delight, and he said, "You are indeed a pervert. We can definitely become very good friends." "Why have you come to Rain Country?" Ling Han repeated his question. "My master foresaw that a secret treasure would appear here, so I came to take a look to see if I could get a share for myself," Gu Fenghua said. "Then you'll have to be disappointed. An ancient historical site had indeed appeared some time ago, and high-level spiritual tools had floated out on the waters of an underground river. However, it's gone by now," Ling Han said, shaking his head. What a wasted trip." Gu Fenghua beat his chest and stamped his feet, looking very disappointed. But he immediately smiled right after, and said, "However, I managed to encounter another pervert on this trip, so it would still be worth it." Ling Han could not help but sweat at this, and said, "Only someone with your charm could be called a pervert. My name is Ling Han, and I definitely would not be able to compare to you in terms of perversion." "Haha, so you do know yourself very well." Gu Fenghua looked very proud at this before he suddenly sighed and shook his head. Since I've already missed out on the chance of getting a fateful encounter, then I'll just go back to the mountains to continue my training." Please. Ling Han and Yun Shuang both made a gesture of respectfully seeing him off. Neither of them were able to deal with this pervert. "Then I'll go now," Gu Fenghua said. "We won't bother with seeing you off," Ling Han and Yun Shuang said at the same time. Gu Fenghua took a few steps before suddenly stopping, turning around, and saying, "Girl, you really can't let me measure your breasts?" "Get lost." Yun Shuang pointed with a finger, forcing down the urge to commit murder. "Looks like I have yet to complete my training to become a full-fledged pervert," Gu Fenghua mumbled. "This time when I return to the mountains, I must surpass my master in terms of perversion, and become the most perverted." After saying so, he took a great leap, and his figure disappeared into the darkness of the street. "There are indeed many extraordinary things in this wide world," Ling Han said pensively. Yet Yun Shuang said, "Feng Yan actually dared to damage a carriage of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. I will definitely report this to Milady when I return, and let milady pressure the academy into harshly punishing that evil man. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You will most likely be disappointed. Feng Yan should have gotten the support of a great power this time round, so the academy would definitely not deal with him. Otherwise, Feng Yan would not have opposed the third imperial prince so openly. In terms of reputation in the imperial city, the third imperial prince was definitely not weaker than Lady Yan." Yun Shuang was still very furious. She beckoned the coachman back, and the two of them returned to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Meanwhile, Ling Han stored the wooden box into his spatial ring. Since he had already promised Lady Yan, and had also received the reward from her, he would of course have to fulfill his promise and concoct the permanent pill. This time, his trip was completely peaceful, and he soon returned to Huyang Academy. "The security in the imperial city does not seem very good," he said to himself. Feng Yan actually attacked him so brazenly on a street, yet there was no sign of any soldiers. He did not know whether it was that they had reacted too slowly, or they had not made a move at all. "I'll just concoct the permanent pill first." He began to concoct the pill. With the ability that he has retained from his last life, concocting an earth-grade alchemical pill was of course a piece of cake, but he did not dare to be careless now. After all, he was increasing the temperature of his flames with the use of the strange fire, so he would not be able to fully control the flames as he wished. But for the Alchemy Emperor, this would only need a slight bit of extra attention from him. Separating the ingredients, purification, and these techniques were used very smoothly. If Fu Yuanshang and Wu Songlin were here, they would definitely again turn pale from shock, because the speed Ling Han was displaying now was a considerable few times faster than what he had shown in front of them. Ling Han just had not wanted to scare them too much previously. Hong, the strange fire burnt brightly, contributing heat that far exceeded what Ling Han could produce based on his current cultivation level. This caused Ling Han to sweat greatly, but the droplets of sweat quickly turned into water vapor from the extreme heat. There even appeared a few cracks on his skin, as signs of impending dehydration appeared on his body. Thankfully, his physical body was strong enough and nearing body of rock cliff, so it was not a problem for his body to withstand such high heat. After half an hour, 3 differently colored flames suddenly appeared on his hand. 3 Fire Guide. This was his trademark secret skill that he had invented himself. "Pill completed," he laughed, and removed the lid of the alchemy furnace. His eyes swept over the contents, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. "The strange fire is indeed extraordinary. At first, I would definitely not have been able to concoct a pill so close to earth grade at my current level, but now, I not only successfully concocted it, but its quality has even reached 16 stars, which is far above my expectations. No wonder there had been so many alchemists wanting to obtain a strange fire in my last life. It would indeed be of great help in the process of concoction. If I was able to fuse with even more strange fires, then wouldn't the quality of the pills I concoct be even higher?" Chapter 150. The Egg Has Hatched. Ling Han was very rueful. In his last life, he had already stood at the top of the field of alchemy, and had not thought of fusing with any strange fire, but from the looks of things now, even if he once again returned to the peak of alchemy, strange fire would still be a source of great help to him. If I ever encounter any other strange fire in future, I will definitely not miss the opportunity to fuse with the strange fire. And now, I'll take a bath first. After pill concoction, he could not avoid being covered by a great amount of dust. Since he was going to sleep later, even if Ling Han was not a clean freak, he would also feel uncomfortable with such a large amount of dust on him. He boiled water in the kitchen, and after a while, he poured it into a big wooden tub. The water was high enough to reach his waist. After a considerable number of times boiling water, he finally filled the tub to mid-level. Ling Han removed all his clothes, and stepped into the tub of water. The warmth from the water spread out and relaxed his entire body. When he was concocting the pill earlier on, he himself was almost barbecued in the process. He had almost lost all the water content in his body, and now with the nurturing of the warm water, his skin immediately returned to its previous smoothness and elasticity at a visible speed. He closed his eyes and rested his mind, considering his plans for the near future. In the Imperial City, he had already reached quite a high level on the social ladder at first, convincing the 2 great bosses of the current field of alchemy to become his pillars of support. He could practically do anything he liked, but Feng Yan's return had brought a very unstable variable into his path. This person was like him, completely ignoring all shackles of rules and regulations. Most importantly, he must have gotten hold of some kind of trump card that allowed him to disregard all rules. If he was also in Gushing Spring tier, he would naturally not fear Feng Yan, but the 6th layer of Element Gathering tier was still a bit too far from Gushing Spring tier. I had thought that my cultivation speed was already very fast, but looks like it's still not enough. He could not help but frown. Could it be that I would have to use passing golden needle acupuncture to force out my potential and reach Gushing Spring tier as soon as possible? But this is undoubtedly a last resort that would only make things worse. It will force me to pay the price of my future potential to force out power beyond my current capability. If it is not the only means available to me, then I had best avoid using such a method. Moreover, there is only one chance to use such a method in my whole lifetime, so I should save this chance for when I need it even more. According to Feng Yan, I should still be relatively safe within these 3 months. With my current speed of cultivation, 3 months would be enough for me to reach Gushing Spring tier, or even 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier, and I need not fear him by then. But that Lian Guangzhu is a little odd. He looked like he wanted to take me in as his personal disciple previously, but did not bother with me anymore after throwing me here. That old man's attitude is a bit ambiguous. Forget it. I need only to increase my own ability, and as long as I am capable enough, whatever devious scheme there is would be of no effect on me. Jia! The door to the kitchen was pushed open, and a dainty figure walked in. It was Lu Ru'er. She quietly walked in, as if she was a thief. Her eyes swept over the kitchen, and saw a head sticking out of a wooden tub which stunned her. She had slept already, but suddenly felt pangs of hunger while she was sleeping. Thus she got up, intending to look for some food, but never thought that she would encounter the master of this household, which naturally caused her to feel the awkwardness a thief would feel upon being caught. Ah! But only after a moment, she suddenly shrieked and covered her face with her hands. She turned around abruptly and ran off. Damn scoundrel! She cursed. Ling Han had a strange expression on his face. This was his house, and even if he decided to take a bath in the middle of the night, why would that offend anyone? Why did he now become a damn scoundrel? Moreover, his whole body was submerged in the tub, and she didn't even see anything. Did she need to have such a dramatic reaction? But after such a disturbance from her, he had also lost the mood to continue bathing, so he stood up, took his towel and wiped himself off, intending to return to his room to sleep. Damn scoundrel, don't come over. I want to take some food, Pu. Who would have thought that Lu Ru'er would return suddenly at this moment? The girl spoke very quickly, and he had just barely heard her when she had already walked in. Schwa! It was as if time had frozen, and the two of them stared at each other without moving. Ah! Lu Ru'er shrieked loudly again, before once again racing out. Damn pervert, dirty pervert! Ling Han rubbed his chin. This wooden tub was tall enough to reach his waist, and had covered completely all the important parts of his anatomy, so there was no possibility of her seeing anything inappropriate. Why was this girl embarrassed again? I am not a pervert, he mumbled. When he recalled how he had encountered Gu Fenghua previously, he could not help but grin. Little girl, let me give you a serious warning. I am now going to put on my clothes, and if you dare to peek at me again, I will smack your bottom sore, Ling Han warned before he stepped out of the wooden tub. He quickly wiped off his body and put on his clothes. Outside, Lu Ru'er's heart was beating like crazy, and her face was as red as a tomato, as she fiercely stomped her feet. Despicable damn scoundrel, if it was not because I had not yet recovered my full ability, I would definitely cut off your dog's head. Wah! I'm going to die from fury. When she recalled how Ling Han's naked body was practically branded into her mind, she could not help but want to go crazy. Ling Han returned to his room, and took one look at Hunyo's egg, which did not seem to have changed in the slightest. He then lay down on his bed and quickly slipped into slumber. Ka, a faint sound was heard, which was especially clear in the silence of late night. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open and he flipped himself up to stand, his hands stretched out in front of his body in a defensive stance. This was due to the alert nature of a martial artist. However, he quickly realized that this odd sound was not because enemies had arrived outside his room, but came from a corner of his room. That giant egg. Hunyo! There was no candle lit inside the room, and the window was also tightly closed, so the room should be completely dark. However, there was a faint flickering light in the room. Light was coming from the eggshell. There were patterned marks on the eggshell, and it seemed as if these marks had suddenly gained a life of their own, continuously flickering on the eggshell.
Hunyo was about to hatch out. Ling Han had a very strange feeling. What kind of race did this little girl come from? Without a doubt, such a great change had happened to Hunyo because she had eaten the godly medicine. From this aspect, Hunyo must have gotten a colossal benefit, and this was a change for the positive. But this was really too strange. Would it be like a butterfly's metamorphosis? A caterpillar entered into its cocoon, and what came out was a butterfly. The answer should be soon revealed. Ka ka ka, slight cracks appeared on the eggshell, and a powerful heartbeat was heard from within. Apparently, Hunyo should have entered a state similar to hibernation, and when the changes to her body were complete, the various bodily functions were awakened. Otherwise, with the little girl's appetite, she would have long rebelled after these few days of not eating or drinking. How could she have so obediently remained inside for so long? Tong, tong, tong.
The sound of the heartbeat was as loud as the cracking of thunder, and Ling Han could not help the slight change to his expression. He had seen many powerful races in his last life, and the strength of the heartbeat, in a sense, would reflect the strength of life and vitality of these races.
From this aspect, Hunyo would be adequate to rank as the top. Ling Han was getting more and more curious, and could not help guessing again. Would the little girl come out with an extra 2 horns, or with a pair of wings?
A ball of light flickered within the egg, spun around, and he could faintly see the shrunken figure of a human being.
Meat!
A loud shout was heard, and this tiny figure suddenly stretched out all her limbs.
Pa!
The egg instantly shattered into pieces, and out popped a tiny little girl.
Chapter 151. A shocking discovery. The meat-eating little girl had returned. Hug, hug.
Once Hunyo caught sight of Ling Han, she immediately pounced into Ling Han's arms, and buried her head into his embrace.
E.
Ling Han examined the little girl from head to toe, but why did he not find any horns, wings, or anything of the sort?
This little girl looked like there was absolutely no difference from before. What was going on here? After he had eaten 2 portions of the godly medicine, the first portion refined his flesh and skin, and the second portion reforged his bones. He had practically gone through a complete transformation, and the changes he experienced were extremely distinct. But Hunyo didn't show the slightest bit of change at all. If it was just as it looked, then wouldn't it have been a waste of the last portion of godly medicine? No. Some changes cannot be seen from the surface. There must have been a great change to the little girl's body. Sniff, sniff. Hunyo wrinkled her nose, and suddenly, a ferocious light shone from her eyes. With a tang, she leaped out of Ling Han's arms and regained the look of a wild beast. All her 4 limbs pushed off from the floor, and "Xiao!" she rapidly jumped out of the room. Aya! Ling Han immediately realized that Hunyo must have used her nose to sense the presence of the Lu sisters. This little girl was like a wild beast, not only having a very good nose, but also a very strong territorial nature. Now that there were 2 strangers who had entered into her territory, the little girl's ferocious character would naturally be roused. Ling Han hurriedly chased after her. Pang! In a few leaps, Hunyo had arrived at her own room.
Without any further thoughts, she immediately barged in, and the door was actually easily shattered to pieces by the force.
Like a little tiger, she pounced in, her mouth slightly open and her hands formed into claws that could attack at any moment.
Damn scoundrel, you indeed had evil intentions. Since Lu Ru'er saw Ling Han's bare upper body, her heart has been beating like a drum and her face was as red as blood. There was no way she would have been able to go back to sleep, so when she heard the sound of the door breaking, she naturally thought that Ling Han's lust was stimulated and he had come to force himself on her. She instantly bounced up, and struck out her palm in an attack. Pang! Her palm struck Hunyo's body. Though her previous power had dropped to the bottom, after a few days of recovery, her power had already reached the level of body refining tier. This palm strike of hers actually caused Hunyo to be flung back. However, she immediately realized that something was off. That was not a huge pervert, or a great lecher she had struck, but rather a little girl. Xiao! Ling Han came in right after, stretched out his arms and caught Hunyeo, who had been flung back by her blow.
Damn scoundrel. Lu Ru'er could not stop herself from cursing when she saw Ling Han was there. And after such a big commotion, Lu Feng'er woke up as well. Her eyes swept over the scene in front of her, obviously a bit confused about what was going on. Kill! Hunyeo struggled in Ling Han's arms, and there was no sign that she had suffered any injury from the blow. Ling Han was relieved, and said with a smile, "It's a misunderstanding. The place that the two of you are staying in now is this little girl's room. She was not here these few days, but has returned just now and discovered that you two have taken over her room, so she thought the two of you were enemies. That's why she is a little agitated." That was not just agitation. She looked like she practically wanted to devour them. The Lu sisters thought as they took in Hunyeo's very ferocious appearance. However, this place belonged to Ling Han, so he was the one who had the final say in things. "Haha, it's late so we won't disturb your rest," Ling Han said with a laugh and stepped back out. However, there was no way to close the door that Hunyeo had shattered. Never mind, he'd deal with the door tomorrow. After he had returned to his own bedroom, Ling Han pushed Hunyeo down to sit on the bed, and said, "Little girl, those two girls are temporarily considered to be friends, so don't attack them." Hunyeo pouted to show her displeasure. She did not like other living creatures trespassing into her territory, but since Ling Han had already said so, she could only accept it. However, little girls would be little girls, and she quickly forgot about her displeasure. She clung to Ling Han and said, "Hug, hug." Ling Han laughed loudly, and examined Hunyeo closely a second time, yet could not detect any kind of changes on her at all. He felt it very strange. That's not right. He immediately shook his head. Hunyeo had sustained a blow from Lu Ru'er just now, but did not suffer any injury at all. There was a definite upgrade to the little girl's physical body, but to exactly what extent, that would need to be confirmed through continuously increasing the force of attack. Forget it, he'd just think about it later. Seeing that there was a faint light in the sky, Ling Han decided not to sleep any longer, and chose to begin cultivation instead. He sat down cross-legged and began to circulate the 5 elements heaven grade skill. His heaven grade spirit base trembled lightly, and immediately started to swallow and suck in the spiritual chi around him like a whale. After he had taken the godly medicine and upgraded his bones, flesh, and veins, the speed at which he could absorb spiritual chi had also increased quite a bit. It was not that his spirit base had become more powerful, but because his veins had become cleaner, which naturally allowed spiritual chi to flow through his veins more smoothly than before. This would also have the effect of increasing the speed of his cultivation. Of course, this was also due to how awesome his spirit base was. Otherwise, after absorbing so much spiritual chi, if he could not manage to refine it into his own origin power in time, what would be the point? At the end, he swallowed an ancient clear pill to further speed up his cultivation. Hunyeo watched him for a moment before getting bored, and imitated him in sitting cross-legged. Ling Han immediately felt something was off, because there had suddenly appeared the eye of a hurricane next to him that was absorbing spiritual chi, and fighting with him over the spiritual chi around them, causing his cultivation speed to drop drastically in a single instant. His eyes snapped open and saw how Hunyeo was sitting cross-legged in a very serious manner, and there was actually a solemn expression on her little face. Yeah. Though he was already sure, he was still very shocked when he confirmed the fact with his own eyes. Hunyeo actually awoke her own spirit base and had officially stepped onto the path of a cultivator. How inconceivable! This little girl was so young. Typically, one would only awaken his spirit base at about 11 or 12 years old. Even if one managed to awaken his spirit base early, that would be 1 or 2 years earlier at most. However, this little girl awoke her spirit base 7 or 8 years ahead of time. Moreover, based on the extent she was snatching away the spiritual chi just now, Hunyeo's spirit base was definitely heaven grade, and could even be a match for his own. One had to know that his spirit base had all 5 elements, and was one of the top-rated even among heaven grade spirit bases. Then what was the little girl's spirit base? Ling Han concentrated his divine sense into his eyes, and used a sliver of the spiritual power he had retained from his last life to gaze into Hunyeo's dantian. What? Ling Han felt a sudden pain in his eyes, and quickly turned his head. He rubbed his eyes with his hand and actually found traces of blood on his hand. But he did not bother about this now,
because he was still astonished by what he had actually witnessed just a moment ago.
Was that real?
He saw Hunyo's spirit base, but was that really a spirit base? Ling Han felt this was inconceivable, and his entire body experienced a coldness that came from a layer of cold sweat. In Hunyo's dantian, that spirit base was actually a slumbering person. That was a magnificent beauty, and though her eyes were tightly closed, causing her beauty to pale quite a few shades, she was still disturbingly beautiful. Even Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan seemed to pale in comparison with this sleeping beauty. There was no mistake. It was definitely that magnificent beauty that was absorbing spiritual qi, and her efficiency at absorbing spiritual qi was not the least beneath him. Ling Han had never seen such a spirit base that could actually take the form of a human being. But this was not what caused him to feel cold. When he had been staring at this magnificent beauty, her eyes suddenly snapped open, and a terrifying killing intent actually sliced to him through his own divine sense. If the Black Tower had not trembled slightly at an appropriate time, most likely, he would not just suffer his eyes bleeding, but have his divine sense completely obliterated.
Chapter 152. Weird.
The spirit was the basis of a human being, and once divine sense was destroyed, what was left behind would only be an empty shell. Just now, Ling Han had nearly stepped through the gates of hell. Curiosity really killed the cat. Ling Han shook his head. If there had not been a monster inside his body as well, he would definitely have landed in a horrible state just now. Without question, the godly medicine activated some kind of power in Hunyo, or awakened her, which should have happened at least after another 4 or 5 years. Yet a very weird feeling rose up in Ling Han, because that spirit base within Hunyo's body, that magnificent beauty, gave him a more powerful feeling than any ultimate warrior of heaven tier. In his last life, the Sword Emperor and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had been the strongest existences among the ranks of heaven tier elites, yet neither of them had caused him to feel such heavy pressure before. He was well aware that even if he had recovered the power he had at heaven tier, he would be completely defenseless facing such a being, just like how his body was easily shattered by a shockwave from the Black Tower in his last life. This was definitely not a power that belonged to the mortal plane. The Black Tower was already a great mystery on its own, taking his body as its new home, but Hunyo was even more mysterious, having what he suspected to be an ultimate being taking the place of her spirit base. Yet she was obviously just a little girl in body refining tier. But when he thought about it, weren't the two of them quite similar? Could that magnificent beauty be developed by some kind of ultimate treasure? If that was really the case, then forming into a very real human-like appearance did not seem that strange. To hell with it. Ling Han pressed a hand to his aching head. This lifetime was really weird. He had just seen the corpse of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier that he suspected had been killed off in a battle royale against an uncountable number of heaven tier elites not too long ago, a great amount of level 9 spiritual tools floating out with the flow of an underground river, and there even appeared a rogue godly medicine and the formation of a strange fire. And now, there was a being that was likely above heaven tier within Hunyo's body, while he had an ultimate powerful entity, the Black Tower residing inside his body. It seemed as if shattering void tier had become cheap all of a sudden. Hunyo obviously did not have much patience. She only cultivated for a short while before stopping, and when she saw Ling Han was looking at her, she grinned and jumped into Ling Han's arms. She rubbed her stomach and declared, "Hungry." That's right. The little girl had not had any food for quite a few days. Cultivate obediently, and I'll go and cook. If you don't cultivate obediently, you won't get any meat. Ling Han issued a condition. Oh. Hunyo pouted, obviously not very happy. She did not like cultivation. It was too dull and boring. Ling Han went into the kitchen to cook. Since the glutton was back, the food that had accumulated like a little mountain here would most likely be completely finished within a few days. She guessed that Hunyo's appetite must have increased considerably after such a drastic transformation. He was already prepared, but the great increase to Hunyo's appetite still gave him a scare. Her appetite actually more than doubled. Thank goodness I have money now, and can take advantage of the third imperial prince's kindness. Otherwise, I really would not be able to keep this little girl fed, he said, shaking his head. When they were halfway done with their meal, the Lu sisters had also awakened. When they arrived at the kitchen, they were shocked and their faces could not help but twitch. That really was a little girl. When she saw the girls, Hunyo immediately moved as if she was protecting her food, her eyes glaring ferociously at the two girls. A low growl came out of her throat, and she had a violent expression that said, "If you dare to stretch out your hands, I will bite off your heads." Damn scoundrel, you really are a pervert.
Lu Ru'er's face paled drastically.
There was a little girl living in the home of a young man, so this was obviously a very big problem.
I am not a pervert, just a bad man, Ling Han said, editing Gu Fenghua's trademark words. Little girl, come over here quickly, we'll protect you. Lu Ru'er beckoned a hand at Hunyo. However, in Hunyo's eyes, such a move was seen as a challenge, causing the little girl to leap onto the table. She had all four limbs on the table, and looked ready to move at any moment. Forget it, don't argue with someone ignorant. Ling Han picked Hunyo up, and stuffed a piece of meat into the little girl's mouth in passing, causing the little girl to instantly become happy as she chewed on it.
Who are you calling ignorant?
Lu Ru'er asked, not accepting Ling Han's opinion of her.
Ling Han snickered and said, "The two of you have been recovering your wounds here in my place for quite a few days, right?
Isn't it about time for you to pay rent or something of the sort?"
"Hang, so you want money?" Lu Ru'er said in a derogatory tone. "How much do you want?"
"Then I'll casually collect this amount per person." Ling Han raised a single finger.
"1,000,000 coins?
Lu Ru'er humphed.
"Deal.
However, once you take our money, we'll become your employers, so we will have the right to command you."
"Che, 1,000,000 coins?"
Ling Han shook his head. "You have to understand that if I hand you over, the two of you will definitely die, so what we're talking about now is the price of selling yourselves. Do you really think a mere 1,000,000 coins is appropriate?"
Selling ourselves? You're the one selling yourself."
Lu Ru'er suddenly paled, but immediately said, "Then how much do you want, 10 or 20 million?" She shocked even herself when she said 10 million. It was not because they could not earn such a large amount of money, but because they did not have so much money saved up, since they had just recently started their careers. "That's wrong. Beauties like yourselves would have to be at least worth 100 million, right? Don't be modest with me. Why don't I deliver the two of you to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion to ask how good the business would be for two beauties in Gushing Spring Tier?" Ling Han appeared to be very impassioned and generous. Lu Ru'er blinked. She felt that agreeing and disagreeing were both not an option. If she agreed, where would she get so much money from? If she disagreed, then wouldn't that be lowering her own value? She did not have enough ability to adapt, and was instantly left stuttering, obviously at a loss at what to say. "Brother Ling, don't bully my little sister so much," Lu Feng'er smiled faintly.
"You damn scoundrel, you were actually playing with me."
Lu Ru'er finally reacted, an angered expression on her face. "Silly girl," Ling Han shook his head. "If you want to stay here, then you'll have to follow my rules. Doing something like entering without knocking would be what a scoundrel would do."
Lu Ru'er knew that he was talking about how she had accidentally peeked at him bathing the night before, and could not help feeling very embarrassed.
She pouted. She was not a scoundrel. Who would have guessed that there would be someone bathing in the kitchen in the middle of the night? Were you washing pig's feet, getting ready to cook pig trotters? When she thought this, she could not help but show a weird smile. This was what was called a mental victory. "In the future, preparing all meals will be your responsibility," Ling Han said. After he told Hunyo not to come into conflict with the other two girls, he told her to cultivate obediently. At first, he wanted to visit Mo Gao, but when he recalled that Mo Gao should have begun his seclusion to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, he could only give up. Ling Han switched to a farther location to cultivate to avoid staying too close to the little girl. Otherwise, they would be fighting over the spiritual qi in the vicinity, and it would impede the greatest display of the advantage of a heaven-grade spirit base. After cultivating for about half a day, Ling Han smiled in satisfaction.
After about another 5 or 6 days, he would be able to advance to the next level, and not too long after, he would be able to give Feng Yan a very big surprise.
At about noon, Lu Yutong and Li Sichan both arrived, bringing with them a big piece of news. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.